This meeting of the Norton Conservation Commission will be conducted remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information and the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and or parties with a right and or requirement to attend the meeting can be found at the end of this agenda. Members of the public attending this public hearing/meeting virtually will be allowed to make comments if they wish to do so during the portion of the hearing designated for public comment by raising their hand virtually or pressing *9 if participating by phone. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event that we are unable to do so, despite best efforts, we will post on the Norton Cable website, www.nortonmediacenter.org, an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting.
Okay, thank you, Dan. And just to list those who are participating tonight from the Conservation Commission and office, we have John Thomas, our Conservation Director, Megan Harrop, our Assistant. I am Chair, Julian Kadish. We have Lisa Carrozza, Vice Chair, and also Dan Pearson, Ron O'Reilly, and Carrie Schneider participating. Unfortunately, Dan Doyle had to resign, and I think we're all sad about that. He just has some overwhelming personal and work obligations, and we thank him for his participation up to now. And so tonight we actually have a full board. We had a prior resignation, but business continues. We are going to open.
Mr. Chairman, we also have a new member. Tamara Vest is here.
Let's see, where is she on the board here?
Hi, I don't know if that helps you to see me, but
Tamara Vest. Okay, well, welcome. So you've been,
thank you.
You got sworn in today or whenever, I assume?
I believe it was voted and approved at the select board meeting last week, and I stopped by on Thursday and signed the paperwork with Mr. Thomas.
Okay, and you actually, I think, have to go to town clerk's office and get officially sworn in. So if you haven't
not done that,
then maybe as soon as possible you can get that taken care of. But definitely welcome, Tamara.
Thank
and
you.
We just have just so much fun here, and you'll enjoy it.
I believe it.
Excellent. All right. So our initial public hearing is determination number 1118 concerning 193 West Main Street, with the applicant being Dylan Robiro, and the project involves repairing a failed septic system with leaching field, with at its closest point being 65 feet from wetlands and 157 feet from Log Brook. And do we have a representative of the applicant?
Yeah, I'm Dave Oberlander with BDO Engineering. I prepared the design plans. And it's just another pretty straightforward septic system repair for an existing dwelling. The system is in the backyard. We kept it up as tight to the house as we could. The wetlands are in the back. It's kind of like a wooded, swampy wetland, and then well beyond is Log Brook. The area appears to have been yard at some point, and we base this on some of the debris we saw around in the area, including an old dilapidated shed that we showed on the plan as well. I think an elderly person lived there, and that the kind of yard just became overgrown after a while. But anyway,
Dave, I just want to clarify for the audience the location of this
I'm sorry.
site. And if you want to just introduce that, that would be great.
Yeah, so this is on West Main Street. It's actually right next door to Tom's Barber Shop. Would be on the west side or the left if you're looking. And on the right side is another house. There's about 3 houses there, right on the corner, kind of across the street from the new bakery in town there, or home plate, whatever's over that side. So yeah, and then toward the back, if you kept walking and hopped over Log Brook, you come to one of the athletic fields for the middle school is back there. So does everyone understand where we are at this point? Okay, so again, just a straightforward system. We kept as far away as we could. There will be some grading because the leaching area is mostly on the flat area behind the yard, but it does go down the slope a little bit. So we'll have to do some grading there, as shown by the magenta lines. I'll just open it up to any questions, anyone.
I just for clarification, this is a gravity system, is that right?
Yes, it is. Yep.
All right, and you'll need to fill a little, you think?
Yes. Yep. The pretty much the back end of the system. You can see the magenta lines. We probably have maybe like a foot to a foot and a half at the highest.
So maybe 10 yards or maybe that much or not?
Yeah, they'll probably just use the material that they dig out for the leaching area.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, and then it does slope off a bit. So I see you have an impermeable liner to, I assume, prevent breakout. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yep.
And how deep does that liner go?
That's a 5-foot wide piece of heavy duty plastic material, and the top elevation is right even with the top of the leaching area. So it's like, and then the leaching area gets buried with 10 inches or a foot of fill. So the bottom of that liner will end up being about 6 feet below grade.
And when I looked at the soil test pits, it looks like there's a very good permeable material there.
Oh yeah, it's very good. So right across the street from the cemetery. They usually put the cemeteries in nice sandy, easy to dig stuff. So
okay, that has not come before conservation before, but at any rate, okay, good. Any questions from commission members?
John Thomas, did you look at this wetland line to confirm it's accurate?
For winter delineation, I would say that it's sufficient.
Okay.
I do have a question.
Say again.
I do have a question. Yeah, I live right next door. I'm on the other
go ahead.
side.
If you could just identify yourself, please.
I'm Lynette Maloney. I live at 191 West Main Street, right next door from the property. And
Okay.
I just have a question because I was wondering, when you drive around town and you see new septic systems going in, they're a little higher than the level ground. And I'm just making sure that it's not going to be higher than my level. Will all the water come into my yard? You know what I'm saying? I don't know if I'm making sense.
no, I understand what you're saying. The
Okay.
water does shed to the back.
Okay.
But we don't anticipate runoff
Okay.
changing and not coming over to your yard. It'll still flow towards the back of the lot.
The back. Okay. Because when we've had really rainy springs and summers, we've had our kids could go out and row the rowboat around the backyard. And I just wanted to make sure with that runoff that it wouldn't be that way kind of thing. That nothing would be running off the septic.
Yeah, we will not be increasing the amount of
Okay.
water. So, yeah.
That's what I would just making sure. I don't know much about this. My husband usually takes care of things, so I'm sorry. It was just a question.
No problem.
Okay.
All right, so it
Thank
looks
you.
like we have another resident, Tom Stevens. You have a question?
Julian, how you doing tonight?
Good.
My question is, and Dave just said it, this water is gonna leach back to the back of the property. That's where I own. So, I mean, there has to be a way to prevent that water from leaching onto my property.
Dave, do you want to address that initially, and I'll add to it, perhaps?
Yeah, sure. As far, I think we're talking about two different things. Maybe I think the original abutter was talking about rain runoff. I believe Tom is talking about the septic effluent. It's all designed to go into the ground, and it's any effluent material is going to percolate pretty much vertically down.
I get pretty
Groundwater
much,
flow does go towards the wetlands and the river, I'm sure. So
right. How's that preventable?
what's that?
How is that preventable? I mean, right now it's not happening to me.
We're not changing anything. I mean, it's gonna still do what it's done since the
It
glaciers.
hasn't done anything. There's been nobody there for several years. It hasn't really done anything.
Well, Tom, I'm not understanding your question. So the material,
I'd like to see a design of what it's gonna look like when it's completed. So I'd have a more comfortable feeling about that water, whether it's rainwater, whether it's gray water, whatever water it's gonna be contained upon that property.
yeah,
And not wash onto my property.
well, we can maybe, if we can put the plan back up, it makes it easier
Well,
to,
Lynette has the same concerns as far as water, right?
say again, I sorry, I didn't get that.
Lynette seems to have the same concerns as far as water.
Yeah, and of course, you know, this is an issue that almost everybody has, that there, you know, the town of Norton is 53% wetlands, so everybody has some concern about water when we have hyrotic conditions. So, but if we look at the plan, it has a barrier around it, which I don't know who has the sharing capabilities, just to illustrate with the pointer that impermeable barrier, and that goes down, if I understand correctly from Dave, that goes down 5 feet. So the leachate from the material that flows out of the closed septic tank into that, which is high bacterial content material, along with very minimal solids, will continue to degrade as it slowly percolates down, and then it gets into the lower water table. It's actually not the deep water table; it's strictly surface. And it, depending on groundwater flow, it may slowly go in the direction of groundwater, as it does now, as rainwater that percolates through the same soils. Now, as I understand it, there's a cesspool there now. Is that correct?
Yes.
So, if anything, this is going to be a marked improvement over the management of the, if you want to use the term contaminated or bacterial laden materials that are going into the soil now. So, you know, from perspective of having looked at many plans over the years, I think this is going to be an improvement of the existing conditions. So I don't think you're going to have any difficulty with this installation.
Well, like I said, as it stands right now, I have some concern with grading. Like I said, I have concern with water runoff back there. I'd like to see some kind of a rendering other than this. Just sitting flat on a screen like this does me really nothing. I mean, I'm not an engineer.
Right, but
I kind of like a vision. You can't put
from
something-
from what I can see from the plan, as David Overlander said, there's actually not going to be a tremendous change in the existing contours. There's going to be a slight change in the lower contour at 104, and 106 might bump up a little, but this is actually going to be
This entire lot is 0.17 acres. So it's less than a quarter acre lot. A whole
Yeah.
lot.
well, I understand, but I
Whole
think
lot.
I
In the
think
last 3 years, this house has been empty. So, I mean, marked improvement of what's going into the ground. No.
well, I
I'd like
can't
to be
speak.
assured that, again, my property's not gonna be affected adversely. That's all I'm really looking at. And again, I think that's not unreasonable for me to ask for some kind of rendering that I can understand. They can make something up, come over, look at it, show me what they're gonna do, how hard they're gonna go. Put it in my head so that I can understand it, so the grading's not gonna offend me.
Hey,
Again,
Roland, I'm gonna suggest that you put some stakes out there showing the limits of fill. It's the easiest thing, forget the rendering. So if you can just stake it out and put, markings on the stake like a surveyor would to say, fill, a foot, whatever it is. And I think they'll get a better visual on the ground.
I think I talked with Tom for quite a while when I was out there, and I understand his concerns, but we're staying on the property. I assured him we would stay on the property.
well, Dave, I was very nice, Dave. I gave you all my property lines.
Yeah, very nice on that. Yeah,
Absolutely. Saved you a lot of money on that one. I'm not out to be a hard guy. I'm
No,
just
but that's-
concerned with my property, you know that.
yeah. I mean, the only wastewater you have to worry about is your own cesspools. This is a Title V compliant system, and as Julian explained, the water is designed to percolate through the soil, and you're gonna get, 99% of your treatment in the first 2 feet of soil. This is percolating through over 5 feet. So by the time it percolates through, it's as clean as the regional groundwater around there. And it's far cleaner than what the antiquated cesspools on your property are putting out. So I don't really understand.
I don't want to interrupt you. I can only come from where
What the issue is
I'm
with
at.
this.
My leaching field in front of my house is twice the size of that yard.
All right, well, but I think,
How old is that one, Tom?
It's 20 years old.
all right, well, we're getting a little off topic because
I mean, I built my house down here 20 years ago. My leaching field is literally twice the size of that yard,
all right,
the entire property.
but Tom, the items that you're discussing are really under the aegis of the Board of Health, and that's the actual functioning of the system. Those are the people that can reassure you more extensively, and we're reviewing this only because it's within 65 feet, I believe, of a wetland, and in the context of the Wetland Protection Act, this activity is completely acceptable. And I think the concerns you're raising has to do with the responsibilities of the Board of Health.
So you're suggesting that I should bring this in front of the Board of Health?
Well, I'm going to be blunt and say this system is in compliance with the Title V regulations, and it's actually an improvement over the existing conditions. So I'm not sure what your objection would be. So I don't know if that helps, but with regard to Wetland Protection Act, this is a fairly discrete project and is in compliance. So if there are further questions, we actually have quite a group tonight. I think probably the largest meeting I've been at recently, 56 participants. I don't see any hands up. And if anyone else has any questions about this, we can entertain it, or we can consider a motion to close this.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to close the public hearing on file 250 dash
No, it's a determination.
to issue a -3 determination.
No, you're getting ahead of
We're gonna
yourself.
close first.
So we just want to close termination number 1118.
Well, that's what I was doing, I thought.
No, you wanted to issue a negative. That's the next step.
That was the second thing I did. I was
All right. Well,
saying,
did you hear a motion to close?
yes.
I think I did.
Motion
Okay,
to
so
close.
now we need a second.
Second,
So motion made by Dan Pearson, seconded by Lisa. We're going to do a voice vote as is required under a remote meeting conditions. So we're going to begin with Dan Pearson and Lisa,
Aye.
aye.
and Ron and Terry.
Aye.
And I'll throw in an aye. So we've closed the public hearing. We can either consider a motion.
We still have, you could call on Tama too.
Oh,
I don't know if
but
she's
she hasn't been
She
sworn in.
can't vote yet. She
Oh,
hasn't
sorry.
been sworn
She
in.
has to be officially sworn in. So,
Yeah.
sorry, but you'll get a review of our procedures. All right, so it would be a quick vote. We have a discrete project, which if carried out according to plan would indicate no need to file a notice of intent, which is under our jargon, -3. So if someone wants to offer a motion, we can go forward with that or carry it out at the end of the meeting. I guess we can do that at the end of the meeting then. Say again?
Well, I was, if someone will second me, I'll make the motion to issue a -3.
Okay,
Second.
that was Carrie?
Yep.
All right, motion made by Dan Pearson and seconded by Carrie to issue a so-called -3, which means no notice of intent is required, assuming the project is carried out according to plan. And again, a roll call vote, starting with Dan and Lisa.
Aye.
Aye.
Ron, Carrie.
Aye.
And I'll throw in an aye. So I guess I will have to get used to, now that we have only one Dan on the commission, just saying Dan. Our next item.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thanks.
The next item, at least in our agenda, does not yet have a file number, but it is notice of intent for the Norton Mansfield Rail Trail. Rather extensive project, but we are going to be reviewing the Wetland Protection Act impacts and mitigations. And this sounds like it's going to be a little bit of an extended review, so we will get the process started. Do we have a representative of the applicant?
Hi, this is Matt Shute from Beta Group, and I'm also here with Jonathan Nero from our office.
All right, well,
You
how do you
both
want
have
to start?
sharing capabilities, by the way, so you can share your screen when available.
Okay, thank you. Can everyone see a PowerPoint slide? with the
Not
name
quite
of-
yet. Now we have a PowerPoint
Now we have
slide.
one.
All right. All right, well, thank you everyone for being here tonight. I'm going to go through a few slides for this project, just an overview, and then my coworker Jonathan Nero will go into a little more detail on the environmental resources on the project. So my name is Matt Shute. I work for Beta Group. We are working for the towns of Norton and Mansfield on the rail trail extension project. This project, so just to go over the roles on the project team, Beta Group is responsible for the design and permitting for this project. The Mass DOT Highway Division is responsible for administering the design process and providing resident engineer services in construction. And Federal Highway is responsible for oversight. The construction of the project is estimated at about $5 million, and that is being paid for 80% through federal funds and about 20% state funds. Right now, it's plan is to advertise this project for construction in the fall of this year, and then work would likely begin in the spring of 23. So just to give everyone an overview, again, the project, most on here are probably familiar with the, can everyone see my pointer, by the way?
We can, yes.
Okay. So just to orient folks, we have the Norton Reservoir here, Mansfield Airport. The existing Mansfield Rail Trail is located right here. This is Fruit Street. So this project begins where the Mansfield Trail ends and continues south over 495 using the existing North Washington Street Bridge. And then it continues south, jumping over here. This is just a match line, and it continues down to Crane Street in Norton.
Just to clarify, we're obviously not reviewing the portion in Mansfield.
Correct. Yep. Yeah. So we've been in front of the Mansfield Commission already. Pretty much showed the same presentation, but yeah, thanks for clarifying where this is the town line right about here. Actually goes through the airport. This dashed line. So the Norton portion begins here and proceeds to the south. This is just a little bit more of a zoomed in room over an aerial photo showing the project limits. The red outline notes what's being designed under this project. Again, the town line, the line's not showing up well here, but this is the town line in Mansfield and Norton. We're going through the Land Preservation Society parcel here, the Winthrop Dell Nature Preserve, using the bridge over North Washington, utilizing Cobb Street. So there's some on-road improvements in order to accommodate bikes and pedestrians on this portion. And the remainder of the project is utilizing the former railroad corridor and railroad bed for the alignment of the project. So, you know, the rail trail crosses North Washington Street in two locations. It crosses Route 123 right next to the old station supply. And then it crosses Plain Street, Briggs Street. And the end of the new path actually meets a section of asphalt trail that was built several years ago by the Mansfield Foxborough Norton Sewer District. They needed construction access for some facilities. And so at that time, they built a section of this for their access, but also for future use as the trail connection to make that connection out to Crane Street. There's a parking area that was constructed as part of that work. So we are doing some work on top of the pavement in this section, but we're not doing any widening of the path that was already built. So just going over the goals of the project, we were looking to, improve safety for alternate transportation modes. The project completes a network gap between the commuter rail in Mansfield and Miles Standish Park. There are plans underway in Taunton to develop a bike trail facility, and hopefully that will connect up to the southern portion of the Norton Trail, which is very close to the Taunton city line. The trail will provide year-round recreation opportunities and improved access to a few land preservation properties that are located along the corridor. So the scope of the work is largely a 12-foot shared use path, pavement markings and signs. We have a few parking areas to be constructed, some pedestrian crossing treatments, some informational kiosks and interpretive signing and benches. And then I did mention also earlier on some of the roadway sections on Cobb and North Washington, there's some sidewalk improvements and an on-road bicycle lane, as well as a sidewalk level shared use path to get people along the roadway sections. And I'm going to go through a few graphics now that illustrate the improvements. So this is largely the cross-section. So, a cross-section view is if you were on the path and looking, along the direction you were traveling, this is what you would see. So we have a 12-foot wide asphalt path with slopes to match the existing terrain. We're trying to overall minimize excavation for the project. So most of the work you see here is actually going to be on top of the former railroad bed. In many cases, the railroad ballast exists, although it may not be visible. It's there. It's been compacted and grown over and so forth. But so this is the section that represents the majority of the project off the roadway and on the former rail bed corridor. This is a rendering on Cobb Street. This shows what we're planning to do to carry bikes and pedestrians on Cobb Street. There's no sidewalk on Cobb Street today. So there's a sidewalk level shared use path that will be constructed. It will allow folks to cross. So the railroad bed is up ahead here, cross Cobb Street once and travel along this side of the road in both directions. And then when they get to North Washington Street, this is the bridge over North Washington looking to the south. So 495 would be below here as you travel ahead. So users will be able to, they will not have to cross North Washington if you're on a bike to continue down and make your way back to the Winthrop Doll Nature Preserve connection. And there will be new sidewalk built on the other side of North Washington. There's sidewalk there today, but it's not ADA compliant, so that will be reconstructed as well. Our overall project schedule, we are about to submit 100% design plans the end of this month. And we've gone through a design public hearing that occurred back in August of 2019. It was held at the library. Prior to that, prior to my involvement in the project, there's been several hearings over the last 10 to 20 years regarding this project. So it's been a long time coming, and the Alternative Transportation Committee in town has done a great job spearheading the effort and initiating this project with MassDOT. And again, construction, this says fall of 22. That's really when the soonest the contractor would get a notice to proceed, the work likely not beginning until the spring of 23. So that includes my overview. I'm going to turn it over to Jonathan Nero to get into a little more detail on the environmental resources.
Thanks, Matt. If you don't mind bringing up the plan set, if you have it available, just starting with the portion at the Mansfield Norton town line. But just to give the commission some environmental context to the project, and again, my name is Jonathan Nero, environmental scientist with Beta Group. Just a brief overview of sort of the environmental context of the project. So as Matt mentioned, the majority of this project will be within the abandoned railroad right-of-way. The resource areas that will be encountered along this project corridor include bordering vegetative wetlands, isolated vegetative wetlands. There's a number of potential and a few certified vernal pools. And there's also the 3-mile watershed area of critical environmental concern within the southern portion of the project. So in terms of the resource areas, the commission may remember a abbreviated notice of resource area delineation was submitted a few years back and approved through a valid ORAD. So that was actually set to expire about a year ago. We did receive a 1-year extension, and I went over this with Mr. Thomas when we filed, but there was a expiration date that we have since passed. However, due to the permit existing before the state of emergency and the governor's order during the state of emergency, that has carried us to have this ORAD still be valid, and it will stay valid until early 2023. So jumping right into it here, this is the Mansfield Norton town line. This is our first area of actual resource area impact. So the area in purple you will see is a portion of a bordering vegetative wetland that actually extends into the maintained corridor. And so the important distinction that I'd like to make here, we had the same discussion with the Mansfield Conservation Commission, is that we sort of have two types, if you will, of wetlands out at this property or this site. You have the naturalized forested, deciduous swamps, red maple swamps that you see within the wooded portions adjacent to the site. There are no impacts proposed there. However, you also have portions of wetlands that either extend into or have formed within the rail corridor. It's likely because, as Matt mentioned, it's basically a large pile of fill from when the railroad was constructed, heavily compacted, poorly draining. So you end up getting standing water and some hydrophytic vegetation growing there. So our first impact area is about 1,900 square feet, where that purple is. And Matt, if you don't mind just going forward one sheet. And then you will see a small triangle, again, on the left-hand side. That's an isolated vegetative wetland. It's a little over 300 square feet of impact. So we are proposing, you can see a portion of one along the bottom left of the screen with some plantings there. We have replication areas proposed that will actually bring us, as far as isolated vegetative wetlands go, 1-to-1 mitigation ratio. For bordering vegetative wetlands, we're closer to 1.5 to 1. So not only will this project result in a net increase of wetland resource areas at the site, those resource areas that are being altered, although they do present some functions in the Wetland Protection Act, they're largely diminished. And the new resource area replication areas to be constructed will provide improved functions of the act. So if you can actually go, I think one more sheet, Matt, it might be two. Yep, that's one more, please. If you could get to the, yeah, right there. So a portion of this project, as we mentioned, will start at the Mansfield Norton town line, head south in the corridor. Because of the 495 bridge, as Matt mentioned, we have to get out to North Washington Street. That's off the screen here to the north. However, to get out to North Washington Street, we've actually had a slight change in design as of late. It will involve work, as we mentioned in our application, on 3 private properties, and that's actually to avoid the runway protection zone associated with the airport. So of most interest, I think, to the Conservation Commission, although this design change has resulted in some work on private properties where we will need to secure easements, taking this alternate route has actually reduced our isolated vegetative wetland impacts fairly significantly, reduced them by about 1,000 square feet. But because this runway protection zone exists and the airport is concerned with security, as part of this project. You can see it sort of wrap around here. On the Winthrop Dahl Nature Preserve, there's this isolated vegetated wetland that you can see on screen with the vernal pool interior to it. We will be required to install some security fencing, not within, but adjacent to that wetland. It'll be a chain link fence topped with barbed wire, solely for security purposes required by the FAA. And so we won't go through every sheet just because I'm sure you're all aware that this is a very large plan set. But these few sheets that we've gone through are sort of the only impact areas in terms of resource areas that will result from the project. The remainder of the project is within buffer zone, but there will be no additional impacts to resource areas. I would mention that given the nature of the site and the context around it, there will be work within the 25-foot no disturb zone under Norton's Conservation Commission policies. So we would require a waiver from those requirements. And again, that work will be largely within previously disturbed and cleared areas. With all that, you know, I don't want to take up too much of your time, and I'm sure you folks have questions. So unless you have anything else to add, we'd be happy to open it up to questions.
I'm all set, John.
I have one or two, and then someone more learned can pitch in. Understand from the first, or it was the second diagram, that the bed of the trail will at some points be below the lip, or not the shoulders rather. Sometimes be below the shoulders.
Say that again. The bed of the trail.
Will the bed on which you have the trail? You remember? I'm thinking back to your section, and will the bed be below the at times be below the shoulders? It seems like it would.
Matt, I think he's referring to the diagram you had with the cyclist in your PowerPoint. The one that shows the different points of view. That one. Yep. Go back one. Yeah.
Actually, that one. Yes. Yeah. So, are we? Where it says varies. Well, is it in both? I mean, it appears that the shoulder on either side will at times be higher than the bed of the trail. Does that question make sense?
Yeah, I understand. So this section is intending to cover all conditions that may be found for this 4-mile project. So that's why the slope is shown going up here and down. Most of the project is an elevated rail bed where you have this condition where ultimately, you know, it slopes down away. There is a several 100-foot section just to the north of Briggs Street where it's actually, this will be the condition where we're matching into slopes on the sides that are sloping down today, and the rail bed is actually lower than the surrounding terrain, correct?
Well, we'll also certainly be interested in what calculations you can make as far as the traffic on the trail will have in terms of runoff, which I would imagine wouldn't be all that great, but
so what, I'm sorry, what's the specific question there?
well, it's the traffic on the rail trail how is it going to how is it going to create runoff that could adversely affect, for example, those, the purple zones, as it were, if at all?
As part of our stormwater analysis, there's several very large watersheds that make up the project itself is within a few very large watersheds. So for each watershed, we looked at the existing and post-project conditions, and there's really a very negligible increase in the stormwater. The actual because of the nature of the prior use and the material, the bed itself today is very highly compacted. With that stone ballast beneath, it's been used for ATV use for a long time, certain sections. So the post-construction condition with the asphalt surface is really not a large difference in how that will function compared to what it does today. We're actually, as a result of the reconstruction of the shoulders and placing new loam and seed on the shoulders, we actually think this will promote more infiltration of some of that runoff from the trail. And again, it is only 12 feet wide, so
Sure.
yeah, we don't expect a huge impact from that.
Okay, thank you.
Jillian, if I could.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hello, Matt Shute.
How are you?
Good, how are you?
Good.
All right, you ready?
Ready.
Okay. So butter notification process, did you look at the linear regulations from 2012? I mean, I assume the project's over 1,000 feet in length. So is that the protocol that you used?
So
Was 1,000 foot from the work zone?
I can answer this, Matt, if you'd like.
Sure.
So my understanding is that regulation is for projects 1,000 feet or greater in length that are linear projects. You would notify all abutters within 100 feet of the limits of work. And so we notified probably in excess of what we needed to. We didn't parse out the lists that we got from the assessor's office, but we did notify everyone that was required under the act.
Okay, well, I think you need to just research it because it's 1,000 feet, not 100 for linear projects. So it's the 2012 DEP directive that you want to probably take a look at.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, so let's get into the stormwater list was not signed and stamped. Do you intend to provide that at some point?
Yes.
Okay, that was the right answer. Okay, so are you taking credit as a redevelopment project for the stormwater standards?
Yes.
But are you adding impervious surface with the introduction of the parking areas?
Correct.
So it can't be redevelopment, right? Technically.
Well, the project overall adds impervious just from the nature of the rail trail.
Right. So if you add impervious, it doesn't qualify as a redevelopment project. So just take a look at the redevelopment standards. Not that it's going to matter one way or the other, but I just wanted to get it right in the checklist. You do have some references in your stormwater standards with erosion control inspections after 30 days. I think there were some notes on the plan. I just need you to make sure those jive with EPA CGP, which is 14 days for inspections and maintenance. The next thing is the impact for the project. I assume you did those cumulatively between Mansfield and Norton at some point, just to make sure you weren't over the 5,000 and
We are over 5,000. Sorry, just jumping in. We are over 5,000 between the two municipalities, but we are planning on filing a 401 water quality certification.
Okay, and as a limited project then. Right. Okay. Okay, if we can look at the plan sheets, starting with sheet number 18, right at the town line. So I think your viewport needs to extend a little bit into Mansfield, because what I'm seeing is, Matt, you could go to sheet 18. So we start in the wetland, and I'm thinking, okay, well, how do we get there? And what happens on the other side of forget the town line for a second, is that a fill in Mansfield as well? And how are you going to access that? It kind of doesn't tell the whole picture on that other side of the line.
Right. Yep, we can include that additional sheet.
Okay, so there's an immediate fill right there in Mansfield, I'm guessing, obviously. So
Yeah.
How are you going to access that, I guess, would be my question. So continuing on with this sheet, the replication areas, what do those consist of right now, today? Do you have to cut down any trees to do that?
No.
Okay. My only concern is with the location proximate to the vernal pools, and could we be selecting a better location for replication instead of all around this vernal pool? I don't know what's there today. Maybe you're adding value to it. So I would like John Thomas or somebody, or even I can go out and take a peek at that to see if it's a viable location. Otherwise, I don't know if we should be messing around with the vernal pool envelope. And there may be other opportunities to locate that.
Yeah, I mean, the corridor is pretty limited, by nature, without doing this on private property, and then we're limited by the grading, obviously, but yeah, if you want to take a look at it, that makes sense.
Yeah, I first and foremost, we just want to make sure there's no trees coming down. And what does the ground cover look like in those areas? So
just, today, the Mansfield, Foxborough, Norton Sewer District, which I'm going to call MFN from here on out, that's their abbreviation. They maintain this corridor today. They go through and they clear cut and mow the entire area. So we actually had to ask them to stop mowing when we delineated this a few years ago, so that the agent can go out and review the flags. So normally this is all clear cut within the right of way. So just another, it added a value add to the project that we're creating a surface for their maintenance vehicles to travel on. This, I actually should have described this earlier, that the entire corridor has a 42-inch sewer running beneath it. And so we've designed the trail to kind of run adjacent to that sewer line to facilitate maintenance by the sewer district. So they'll no longer have to mow the entire right of way as they do today to access that. So just want to add that.
Matt, can you point to where the sewer is in the right of way?
Sure. So.
And John Thomas, I think you need to get a note to MFN to tell them to stop clearing the vernal pool.
So this black dashed line is the record railroad baseline, and it basically follows that baseline.
Oh, okay. So it's like it goes through the vernal pool then.
Right.
Okay. Fascinating.
I would just add in for Lisa's knowledge that, and obviously I think the commission going out and doing a site visit would really help paint the picture for you folks, but a lot of these potential vernal pools very close to our limits of work are those areas I was describing, sort of ponding within highly compacted areas. And there's some herbaceous vegetation there, some goldenrod, spirea, but you also have a lot of phragmites and other invasives. So I would feel comfortable, saying to the commission that these replication areas would offer an improvement in the area.
Okay. Matt, can you scroll further to the south on that that right away, and just describe, I think in this area, I saw like less than a foot of fill, yet the clearing limits seemed excessive to me in some locations. They were almost wider than the path, but they're, you weren't really more than a foot off grade.
So the
So was there an envelope that you had to?
the standard, we're required to show the clearing limit to be 5 feet minimum from the toe slope.
Okay, is that in your cross section anywhere? So that's a clearing limit that's gonna be maintained in perpetuity for maintenance, to make sure limbs don't fall on people and things like
That's right.
that?
It's in the construction details.
Okay, would you mind putting that in the details for this? It's just not something that's inherent, because I kept wondering, why are we so far away if we're not even really touching the grades, so.
Yeah, I'm trying to get, the sheet's in the set. I'm just trying to get to it
Okay,
right here.
okay, so there's just 5 feet on either side. All right, that's what's dictating that width. I got it. Sheet 8, I think it's 18. Yeah, what's the one with there's 2 trails on it? I think it's the one near the at the airport.
Oh, this is 18, yep.
Yeah, it looked like there were 2, it might not have been this plan sheet. It looked like there were 2 trails shown on one sheet, and I was confused.
So it was probably this sheet. So what's happening?
Oh, there you go, that's it, yep.
So this is where we had to reroute the trail around. So the airport property line is here. Originally, we were within the airport property and we were impacting this isolated vegetated wetland. So we've avoided that completely. Now we are going through 3 private parcels here. And then as it goes, this is the Winthrop Dahl parcel here. So going to the next sheet, it gets a little awkward to show this. But so that's the trail alignment. This is the dotted line represents the limit of disturbance for them to get in and construct that chain link fence along the airport property boundary, and continue that out to 495. The airport has a fence.
Proper.
What's that?
That's not the trail proper then?
No, the trail's still up here. No, this is not trail.
Okay.
Yep.
Can you go back to the sheet before for a second? So to the far south, we have proposed clearing limit line.
Here?
What is that pointing to if the trail is above it to the north?
So that is for construction of the airport fence.
Oh, same thing. Okay, okay. All
Yeah.
right. So you have that whole swap just because of the fence. Okay.
Yeah, if we weren't doing the fence, our limit of work would be, we really don't need to go onto the airport property to grade the trail here. It's really just to set that fence.
Okay, so that's what's driving. Okay. Sheet 16, you get some sediment controls. I just want to make sure they're set in the right place between the mitigation area and the wetland, not just on the project side of it. So just watch out for those. And then you show 3 different types of sed controls in the detail sheet, right? You have silt fence, compost filter tube, and then a combination. Where is the distinction made between those 3 in plan view?
It's not. So we'll have to circle back. It's a good question. MassDOT dictates we use those details, and then there's a standard spec for sedimentation fence. So I'd have to look at that spec, but the plans do not differentiate right now.
Okay, I mean, so, but eventually the contractor's gonna have to bid on it, so how do they know which one to install where? I mean, it can be the same thing for when we do the pre-construction meeting and we look at the sed controls. How do we know what's supposed to be where? Or which control goes where?
Right.
And then the other thing I noticed is, and it might be a MassDOT standard, is that you put sediment, you just kind of close your eyes and put sediment control everywhere. Was that to just designate the limit of work in some places? And why wouldn't you just use an orange poly construction fence instead of plowing through so much sed controls? I mean, you have it out of jurisdiction in a lot of locations too.
It's standard practice and their direction, anything on a downslope away from the proposed work.
Even though you're not protecting the wetland.
Correct.
Okay. It's just my tax dollars, that's all. All right.
I don't disagree with you. It's more important for a roadway project where you've got, properties that are closely developed next to the road, and you're filling a slope here. We've got a lot of wooded areas adjacent, but
yeah. Okay. Sheet 25, you have something called a three rail fence. Going
Yes.
in, and what's the purpose of that?
The design standards dictate that if our slope adjacent to the path exceeds a certain amount, we need the three rail fence as a barrier to protect users from going down that embankment.
All right, if you can zoom in just, okay, it's slow. Can you just zoom in for, I think.
So question, which sheet is this?
25.
So Matt, where's your said fence here?
The cyan colored line.
Okay. Oh, that's right. Okay, I got it. So that's at the toe slope. Okay, I got it.
Yeah. You can see the contour gradient here on either side, and
it gets steeper. Okay. Okay. Staging, laydown, and access. I assume that's going to be up to the contractor. We're just going to have to put parameters on it. Obviously, no staging and stockpiling in resource areas. I don't think you have any flood zones here.
I don't believe.
Okay.
No floodplains.
Okay. So we would end up with a condition in this order that basically says no stockpiling materials in resource areas and buffers. And I'm assuming that you have enough room on the right of way and other places to accommodate that. Hopefully.
Yeah, there should be. I mean, it is a narrow right of way, but there are there's some town properties along the route that could be negotiated.
I think you guys are going to use those parking areas as staging areas too, right?
Most likely, there's no way we can tell what the contractor will look to use, but that's possible.
Are you sure this is not 26?
Well, there's always two sets of numbers on map sheet plans. One's in the top right and one's down the bottom, right?
Well, no, this is sheet 26.
It's
because
20,
you go over here.
It's 26 and 25 of this PDF. Sorry.
There you go. Okay.
Oh, okay. Well, we have some more sheet numbering confusion when it gets up beyond 50. You're gonna have to look at that.
So one of the last questions I have, well, second to last, is amenities in terms of, I notice you have, which is a massive problems in this town, is dog waste. It doesn't matter if there's containers, people just don't seem to want to use them. So where are those placed? And hopefully they're not just at the beginning and the end, but can you go over that, please?
Yeah, honestly, off the top of my head, I don't know exactly where they are. I'd have to scroll through the plans. I think we have one at every roadway crossing, but I could follow up on that.
Okay. Because I find that if you pass one and you're not going to pass one for, 200 yards, the average person's either just going to leave it on the ground or throw the bag somewhere. So
right.
I would encourage you to have as many of those as possible. The interesting and ironic thing is they don't really work if you think about this, because I have a dog, right? They don't work at the beginning of the trailhead. your dog's just getting out of the car. They want to go, 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 go. It's not until a couple hundred feet down, inevitably, that they want to go. It's
Right.
not where you park. And then you're like in the middle of nowhere with no receptacle. It's back at the parking lot.
So I can go through these if you want, Lisa. This is, whoops.
Just the reality of it. Like, I would ask for one in the middle somewhere.
Yeah, so we have one at the park. So there's one at the Fruit Street crossing where the Mansfield Trail ends. They have one there. We have one proposed in the small parking area. It's really an existing parking area at the Winthrop Doll Preserve. There's one proposed there.
Mm-hmm.
On the other side of North Washington at the Cobb Street crossing, there's one proposed. At the first North Washington Street crossing closest to Newcomb Street, there's one there. The next one is at the Arrowhead Drive intersection. And then at the North Washington Street crossing, the furthest crossing to the east or to the south. The name of the cross street nearest this is escaping me. It actually circles back out to Cross Street.
Johnson.
Yes.
Johnson.
Come on, you don't remember?
And then East Main Street, there's another way station. Plain Street, Brake Street.
Okay.
I think we actually, we checked with the town to make sure we weren't committing the town to too much maintenance with these. I remember there being between 8 to 10 proposed, so that's about right.
Okay. Yeah, if we may have to adjust one to be in like the middle somewhere, I'd have to look at it as overall, but just make sure they're spread out far enough and they're not just at access points. I think would be helpful.
Yeah, my concern in the, located in between access points would be maintenance, and will, town staff know, kind of remember to access that one in the middle and clean that out,
Yeah, Matt, that's one of my questions I have, because, we just want to make sure that we can prohibit all-terrain vehicles from entering the premises and stuff and getting access to conservation properties more readily, easily. What sort of factors have you guys thought of for prohibiting those sort of activities?
For prohibiting motorized vehicle use?
Yeah.
So we can go over that. At every roadway intersection, so the way these facilities used to be designed, and you'll see it on the Mansfield Trail, was to put a bollard at in the middle of the trail where it intersects the roadway.
Mm-hmm.
However, that is shown to be more of a safety hazard for trail users. Some folks don't slow down, and it presents an obstruction in the middle of the trail. So that's no longer recommended. So what's been done on many facilities is we have a low planted island at every roadway intersection. This will be planted with some low growing ground cover. And this median will be mountable. Emergency vehicles can drive right over this. However, it discourages, vehicles from turning into it. It doesn't look like a driveway. And, ATVs are, generally looking to use unpaved surfaces. And once this trail's open, it's going to be heavily used. You can never have enough parking for these. And once there's users on it, bikes, walkers, rollerbladers, the ATV use will be diminished. Or should be prevented. There'll be signs for that. I know people don't look at signs, but the police will be able to patrol this on bike now as well. So those are all factors that have been proven to prevent ATV use on these types of facilities.
Right, and then, it just provides additional connection to other conservation properties. So that was my only concern.
Right.
Matt and others, if I could just step back for a sec. I know Lisa had asked one question that we didn't have an answer for, and I just had to go back and refresh myself as we always do with the regulations. But I just would like to clarify the abutter notification question. So Lisa's correct with the amendments that were made to 310 CMR and I believe 2014 regarding abutter notification. One of those which applies to this project in 310 CMR 10.05 is an applicant proposing a linear shaped project greater than 1,000 feet in length, which is our project, is required to provide notification only to abutters whose lot is within 1,000 feet from the project site. So that's abutters with a capital A. And if you look at the definition of that under 10.04, that's owner of land abutting the activity. So the intent of that regulation, I believe, is to make sure that if you're proposing a long linear project in the middle of a large parcel, you're not notifying everyone within 100 feet of the property line. So you would essentially, what we did is you take the 100-foot radius from the outer edge of all the property lines from the parcels you're working on, and then you do an offset of 1,000 feet from your actual limits of work, which is the project site as defined in the regulations. And so basically in this case, it was a wash. And plus we would rather send out additional notification than less. So I do believe we were able to notify in compliance with the act.
So you're saying you over notified because you did within 100 feet of the property?
Right, but because the corridor is so linear and it's not like a linear project in the middle of a huge parcel, it would have been the same either way. I started parsing through the abutters list, and we ended up having to include everyone anyways, so we ended up notifying everyone.
Okay. I mean, that's what I would have asked you to do, was to look at the delta. I wouldn't make you go and re-notify. I would say, okay, under the linear regulation, abutter notification directive, what would the delta have been? Go notify those people and we'll continue the hearing. I mean, it's going to be continued anyway, I assume. So if you've already done that exercise, that's fine.
Yes, we have.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I think, John Thomas, I'm really interested in the replication areas. And
Okay. I mean, I
it
think,
makes sense where they're putting them.
yeah, I think it would be good for Matt and Jonathan to work with their team to kind of flag or mark those out in the field for us.
Yeah.
And then let us know when they're ready for us to kind of go out as a group or individually to kind of take a look at those areas. So that way it's easier for us to see from field to plan conditions. If they're okay with that.
Matt, would that be something we'd be able to do? As you know, I'm pretty local. I would have availability to go out and just tape these in the field with flagging.
Yep.
Yeah, I just want to make sure they make sense, that we're not cutting down any trees, that it just makes sense in the landscape and that it's going to add value.
Absolutely.
So I have a question about the set of plans, and I don't know if, I don't think it's really directly relevant to the Wetlands Protection Act, but we go up to, I think the end of your project is sheet 50 or so. Then a new set of plans continues. Yeah, a sheet. I'm talking about the paper sheet, which would be your number, and you have right there in the corner. So at plan 50, it's pretty much the end of the project, because I think this is in the now paved area. And then it picks up after sheet 53 or 56, I guess it is, with a different set of plans, which seems to go back to the border of the town of Mansfield and town of Norton. And then the plan numbers become a little bit odd. And it may be that you have an explanation for it, or it may be at least the plan set that I got. Because where the continuation is, for example, on sheet 59, the continuation is sheet 70, and then if you go to the next sheet, it's labeled 60, and the continuation is 71, although it appears to be continuing on 61. So if you guys could just check that, maybe it's not a set of plans that is going to get in the hands of the actual contractor, but right now I couldn't follow the continuation after above 50 in this set of plans. So if you can just check it to be sure that
yeah, so I can address some of that. I was just trying to catch up to what you were referencing. So as part of the DEP comments we received on the Mansfield filing, we were asked to include a set of grading plans for the project as well. So that next series of plans you see beginning on sheet 57 is the curb tie and grading series of plans, which is laid out differently than the construction plan because we don't have a profile on these sheets. So it's a different view that we're able to basically decrease the amount of sheets in half for this series of plans because we don't have a profile on the bottom. So it's just all plan view reading from the top to the bottom.
Your continuation boxes don't jive. For example, on that sheet you have, it's like 10 off or more. So, for example, right there, your square, if you can open it up a little bit more, zoom it in, you see it doesn't jive with the next sheet. Plan continued on,
right here. Yep.
68. So it's off by about 10, and I don't know if this had to do with, some revision. So any contractor that gets these is going to have to scratch their head and figure out, well, what actual sheet does it continue on? So if you can just check that to be sure that there's not some mistake been made there. So at this point, it seems that we're going to need to continue this hearing, and we have to review the participants list to see if we have questions. And one way to enter your question is you go to the reactions button on your screen. You can raise your hand, but we're kind of informal, and you can potentially just raise your hand, although we have 3 screens here, so finding out who is asking is a little bit difficult. But unless there are questions from commission members, I think we can open it up to the wide audience.
Mr. Chairman, Lisa asked all the questions. She had all my questions. So.
Okay, Lisa's good at that. So I see Christopher Hayes has a hand up, and maybe we can go to your question. And please identify yourself and where you, what the relationship is to the project.
Thank you. My name is Chris Keys. I live at 263 Godfrey Drive in Norton. I was involved in abutter meetings for this process. So I have spent a couple of 100 hours worth of time on these plans and relative to this project. I did want to mention relative to the couple of questions that Lisa had relative to dog waste and then also questions regarding ATV usage. And just wanted to say that I certainly will be significantly involved in a friends group relative to the Mansfield Norton Rail Trail. And having read a lot of information about how rail trail groups, friends groups work, they've been very, very successful in eliminating usage of vehicles like ATVs, dirt bikes, those kind of things, once these rail trails open up. And then the second obviously would be making sure as citizen group that, you know, dog waste would be properly disposed of and so forth. So this is really a community effort. And I just wanted to stress the fact that these are important issues, and you know, I certainly take them seriously and would certainly advocate strongly within the scope of a friends group to make sure that those couple of issues are addressed. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And we have another hand raised, identified as William. If you could identify yourself and how you're involved.
Well, hi, my name is William Francis, 66 Plain Street. I'm one of the abutters to this bike trail. I have a question. You said that this is going to have heavy use, this bike trail. How did you come to that conclusion?
Basically just historical data from trail projects once they're constructed. Typically there's counts that are done on how many users per day. Also looking at the Mansfield trail facility. I think anyone in Mansfield will tell you that that trail is fairly well used. The parking lot's always full. So for those reasons.
Okay, but you haven't taken any recent surveys of the town who might utilize this bike trail?
No specific survey, no.
No, you just went to historical data. But I promise that if it is heavily used, what facilities are you going to put in place for human waste when nature calls? You don't want people walking off this trail path, parking their bikes and then using people's properties as bathrooms.
Yeah, there's no facilities proposed on the project for that.
What do you think there should be?
Those types of so the project is subject to certain funding restrictions from the state and federal government, and Mass DOT does not fund that type of facility on these projects.
Okay, because I'm only about 50 yards from where this bike path will exit onto Plain Street, which raises a few other questions. Well, the bike path is going to exit onto a number of roads. I'm not sure. I don't want to get out of the purview of the conservation, but you know, it's going to empty out into a state highway on 123. It's very heavy, a lot of traffic there. They're putting stoplights there. You really think that this is really a safe thing to do, to put into that area?
There will actually be a new traffic control at the 123 crossing. It's called, again, we are getting kind of beyond the scope of this hearing, but I'm glad to explain it. We went over it at the design public hearing we had back in 2019. There will be an overhead mounted pedestrian hybrid beacon that will stop vehicles so that users can cross the road there.
And just getting back to the point of human waste facilities, is from the data that you're aware of, is this a problem on other trails?
I'm not aware of that issue.
This is going to be over 2 miles long.
The project is almost 4 miles, a little over 4 miles long.
4 miles long. So you're going to have people on the trail. You don't really know how many people are going to be on the trail, but there's no facilities for them to use on a 4 mile trip. especially with bikelists, they if they're riding a bike, of course they're drinking a lot of water, so they might get pretty well hydrated. But just people on the path itself, roller skating, rollerblading, I think it's an issue that has to be addressed.
I think we're getting a little off topic on this discussion. I think sanitary systems fall within Board of Health jurisdiction.
Well, also it's a impact on the environment, isn't it?
It's
Yes.
But right now, since there are no plans for any restrooms, we can't really deal with that, right?
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Well, one final question. You talk about going onto people's private property.
There are a couple of properties within the project where the town needs to acquire easements to construct the trail, yes.
And
those abutters have all been notified directly by the town already.
okay. All right. I think some of the other questions I might have might be outside of the scope of this
All right.
commission.
So
Thank you.
There's
Thank
another
you.
participant that has their hand up, Julie Oakley. Do you want to ask your question?
Sure. My name is Julie Oakley. I live at 6 Beverly Lane. I am literally adjacent to the soon-to-be, hopefully, fingers crossed, rail trail. I just wanted to speak about to let think Lisa especially know I was notified, being an adjacent abutter, and also to speak to what I think is a fantastic project. And I think right now the trail is heavily utilized. Anybody can come and listen to my dog bark every time someone comes across the trail, and it's very exciting to see this come in front of this board, and I'm sure other boards to come, because it'll be a vast improvement, I think, to the current state. It'll be a nice, safe place for people to recreate. I think, good point about dog waste, but I will have to, mention on other points that there are numerous, biking and recreational trails facilities around Norton, in Rhode Island and surrounding communities that are going to be, are great examples of exactly what this will look like. So I just wanted to speak in favor of the project, and I'm very supportive and looking forward to this being in my backyard.
All right. Thank you. So I do not see any other hands up. It would be my understanding that this needs to be continued. Is that a fair statement, John Thomas?
That's correct.
Mr. Commissioner, if I may, I would just like to ask before we do continue. I know Matt and I have been taking notes on any questions we may answer. I don't know if there's anything else the commission might want to leave us off with, so we can try and address as many of your questions as possible before the next hearing. Otherwise,
I may have some questions later, but I'll email them through John to you guys before the next hearing.
Thank you.
So our next upcoming meeting is the 14th of February. And after that, it's the 28th. Do you have a preference as to when you want to be on the agenda again? Either one of you?
I'm just wondering, John, your thoughts on the flagging, and do we have time to do that, have the meeting, and respond to some of these comments before the 14th?
Well, for me, I guess it's contingent upon you guys. I can head out there anytime you guys want to take a look at the area and just let the commission members know so they can take it out at their own occasion.
And there's nothing to lose by continuing it till the 14th. And if you don't feel like you're going to make it on the 14th, just ask for a continuation until the following, in case you have it done by the 14th.
Yeah, that would be fine as well. Is that you can ask for a continuation then.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we do continue file 250-10XX as we listed to the February 14th meeting of the Conservation Commission.
I'll second.
And we're looking for, you've got a second? Okay. So motion made by Dan Pearson, seconded by Carrie Schneider. Again, for continuation of this hearing. And a roll call vote, starting with Lisa and Ron.
Aye.
Aye.
And then we have Carrie and Dan Pearson.
Aye.
And I'll throw in an aye. So motion carries. This is continued until February 14th. Thank you, and thank all the participants.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next hearing is continued, and it concerns file number 250-1091 at 6466 West Main Street, Norton High School, for the proposed project of reconstruction of the athletic fields, running track, and a tennis court. So it looks like Bree is here as a representative. So go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Bree Sullivan. I am with Gale Associates, and I have with me tonight Ryan Thackeray and Marie Rudiman. And so I guess I'd like to start by saying that we have sent a letter to the commission, as well as some new information, a new plan set, and a few other items that were requested by both the peer reviewer and the commission. That letter, we hope, addressed all the questions and comments from the commission, with the exception of one, which we're going to cover tonight. I would like to ask first whether the commission, so that the response letter was several pages long, and I can review the responses, but I want to be respectful of people's time, the commissioner's time, and abutters' time. So I want to know what the commission wants to hear from that, if anything.
Well, if you want to do it that way, I get the questions I will have to ask in addition to the PFAS is about the mitigation. So you're saying that we'll have something like 130,000 plus square feet of mitigation for the or is it just, well, if you're going to cover mitigation anyway, I'll let you talk about it.
Dan, if you don't mind, I'll just give
Sure.
some backstory. So Bree, Steve Stanish, who's the peer reviewer, and myself met on a call a couple days ago, and basically they're going through their second iteration of the stormwater criteria right now. So Steve is in anticipation for the next meeting. He's actually going to be on the call, and we're hopeful that the stormwater criteria will all be ironed out by then for this whole entire project on the 14th. So I anticipate that this meeting's going to probably be continued until then, just to give everybody kind of an outline. But I think, moving forward, I think, Bree, if you want to just touch upon some of the stormwater stuff and then get into some of the other environmental concerns, I think that's probably the best pathway for you.
Okay, yeah, I can do an overview of what we did rather than go through line by line, which, you can certainly read the letter. And I'm willing to speak to any points of that. I can address what you're asking, Dan. So what we did is, as John said, we had a working meeting to iron out a few of the details of the peer review. We then provided subsequent information to the questions that the peer reviewer answered later that day. And the peer reviewer is now doing the second review of the plans that we modified in accordance with the peer reviewer's comments. With those comments, we also addressed Ms. Carrozza's questions and the other questions from the commission. We updated the plans and provided that plan set to the commission along with the review letter. So specifically, we addressed the peer reviewers' comments with respect to sedimentation and erosion control and items that were not clear or missing from the plans. So what I can do is I can actually go over some of the major things that the commission touched upon. See, I'll share my screen.
You should have screen sharing capabilities.
Okay, great. Let me see here. Share screen. And where did the plans go? Hold on. Interesting. Let me try that again. All right, so that's there. There we go. So as a quick overview, this is the existing football field, which is going to be replaced with a synthetic turf field and a new track. This is the existing practice field. There's also a softball field up here right now. This is going to be a synthetic turf multi-purpose field. I'm sorry if there was a delay in that display. Can everybody see this now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. And this is a bank of 5 tennis courts in the area where the existing baseball field is here. And that's the extent of the proposed changes. So the high school is here and the Henry L. School is here. So there were several comments by the commission with regards to base plan items and existing trees, and we went through and we updated the plans accordingly. The tree line was one of the items that the commission identified as being not correctly shown, specifically the tree line in this area here. So in the area adjacent to where the proposed multi-purpose field is, the tree line was actually much further back here. We had shown it up into the field more than it exists today. We corrected that. There was a little bit of issue with the tree line in here that we corrected. It doesn't quite encroach out here as much as we showed it, so we looked at that and we corrected that. One of the comments by the commission was, what is the extent of impact to the existing trees along the fence line? So the proposed track will have 2 additional lanes added to it in an effort to greater meet the recommended standards for competition play at this location. And so what the 8-lane track will do is it'll allow Norton to be more or less eligible. They're not requirements, they're recommended standards. They'll be eligible to host regional competitions. So the track is going to be, it's currently 6 lanes. We're going to be increasing it to 8 lanes. So with that, that requires us to encroach in the 25-foot no disturb zone. So what I did is I went out there at the last meeting and before the last meeting and took an inventory of the trees, updated the plans to show which trees are going to be removed and which trees need to be trimmed. So I have an approximate count on the trees and the diameter breast height. So you can see here, we updated the plans to show that. A couple of the trees were dead. Many of the trees were smaller. There were a couple of larger trees in this little area where the fence is. The overhanging limbs, there are definitely some overhanging limbs that need to be trimmed there. So I've called that out. we've also quantified, as we did originally, quantified the extent of the impact. To speak to Dan's question about the impact and the mitigation area, let me just bring this back up.
11 to 1, I think you said.
Yes. So the area that we're impacting is basically this area down here. So you can see the buffer zones. Let me just retract this. So you can see the buffer zones here. 25-foot buffer zone comes through here. It actually gets into this area where the proposed walking track around the outside is here. It's about 1,000, just over 1,000, so 1,082 square feet of additional 25-foot no disturb zone impact. And what we're proposing is to replicate that or to mitigate that by taking an area that we didn't show hatched. It wasn't very clear where that area was on the previous set of plans. You can see it here with this diagonal hatch. This is a proposed vegetation management area.
Oh, I see.
So this hatch here and this hatch here. And the replication is about 11 to 1. The mitigation area is not replication. So in essence, this is mowed right now, and the plan is to let it go back to natural vegetation. And so to delineate that, we provided, we called out a post and rail fence. We added a detail for the post and rail fence on each side here. The reason why we chose post and rail fence is it allows us to do a visual delineation of the vegetation management area, but it will impede wildlife. It will impede less wildlife that wants to pass from that area into the field, as opposed to a chain link fence. It also allows us to mount signs to delineate the vegetation management area. A few more things that were addressed. The project requires us to construct in an area of flood zone. So it's a zone A. The zone A flood zone doesn't have a 100-year flood elevation associated with it because a detailed study of the area wasn't done. So what we did is we provided a compensatory storage area. You can see it hatched down here. And we provided the calculations to show the two different areas match. So it's hard when you don't have a flood elevation to determine really where your replication has to be. So we just kind of looked at the elevations where we're proposing construction, and we chose a replication area that has approximately the same elevations, which is what you're required to do according to the Wetlands Protection Act. There were a number of plan updates that we made. I'm not going to go through those extensively. They're called out in the response to comments. Unless the commission wants any further explanation on the changes, I'm certainly willing to speak to anything in particular. I think those are the major points, though, that were brought up as far as comments are concerned. So what I'd like to address is the commission had raised an issue with a potential issue and wanted us to speak to the safety or the any issue with the infill that has been chosen for this project. So I've prepared a presentation to give to the commission. I'm going to call that up now. Actually, I'm going to do this. I'm going to stop sharing. And then I'm going to do here. Here. this in. Let's see here. Where's my slideshow? There we go. Okay. Can you see the slide, the first slide?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So as I said, I'm Bree Sullivan. I'm Chief Civil Engineer at Gale Associates. And I have with us tonight, we retained an independent expert on toxicology and risk assessment. So I have with us tonight Marie Rudiman. She is a toxicologist and senior risk assessor. This is what she does for her career. And she is with Weston and Sampson. So with this presentation, we are going to review, first of all, how the synthetic field is constructed and how the stormwater is going to drain down through the field. We'll then review some of the health risks that have been purported to be associated with synthetic fields and crumb rubber infill in particular, as well as the environmental impacts of both turf and natural grass fields. We're also going to talk about the research that's been done, some of the key research that's been done around synthetic fields and crumb rubber, and those perceived environmental impacts. We're also going to provide some monitoring results from a field in Massachusetts where they actually tested for several years the groundwater and the effluent coming out of the field after it was installed. And then we'll follow it up with some summary conclusions and a question and answer portion. So the typical turf field is constructed as you see here. So the top layer, of course, is this synthetic turf, which is basically slit plastic. Sometimes it's twisted plastic, sometimes it's a combination of both. And that is laid on top of either a pad, which is a shock pad. The shock pad is there to help soften the field and to make it less impactful if you have a hard hit to the ground. In this design, we do have a shock pad. In this design, it's not necessary. When you use crumb rubber infill, you don't have to have a shock pad, but both of these fields have shock pads. Below that shock pad is a fine stone that allows the field to be graded to a precise grade. And below that is a coarser stone that's used as a layer that stores the stormwater and helps it to infiltrate into the ground below. We also have collector pipes, as you can see in this mock-up here. These collector pipes, when we have a larger storm event and the storm event exceeds the infiltration capacity of the soils below, the collector pipes will collect it and carry it to the outfall through an outlet control structure. If you look at this cross-section, this is a cross-section of the turf, the synthetic turf. So the synthetic turf is essentially plastic film, like I said, and twisted filament that is woven together into a carpet. Essentially, many of the manufacturers that make turf are carpet manufacturers. So starting at the bottom, this black layer here is the binder that holds the grass together. They then will place a sand ballast over so this is silica sand like you would find at the beach. And it holds the carpet down, the turf down. And then you can see a mixture of sand and, in this case, crumb rubber that's used as infill. And what that does is it cushions the surface and it holds the blades of grass upright. And And that is a modern turf field. The way it's constructed, I just ran through the way it's constructed. Here are two of the types of cross sections that we'll see at Norton. The football field has a crown in the middle. We have this storage stone here, it comes down through the synthetic turf, and then down through the storage stone. And these squares here are they're pipes. They're actually rectangular pipes that during the higher event storms will carry the excess water to the perforated pipes that go around the field. And then they're carried to a control structure and then out to the wetland. The multi-purpose field is actually pitched in one direction towards the wetland, away from West Main Street. And you can see a similar representation of that here. Both of the fields are entirely surrounded by cast-in-place curbs. So these concrete curbs that act as barriers. They also anchor the turf carpet with adhesive to the curb to keep it in place. And so this speaks to one of the things that one of the commissioners asked about, well, what about crumb rubber that washes from the turf and make it into the wetland resource area? So these trench drains that you can see here, and we actually have trench drains, they're not shown on this cross section, this is a simplified cross section. We do have trench drains in the multipurpose field. These trench drains have sumps in them before they go into the pipes. So any crumb rubber that gets carried over will be captured in the sump, and then any that continues through will be captured in the outlet control structure. So after the pipes collect the excess runoff, they generally go to an outlet control structure. The field one has an outlet control structure that basically has this riser in here. And during the higher flow storms, this outlet control structure will fill up and will finally get to this elevation to the top of the riser and overflow. Until the time that it overflows, there will be no discharge to the wetland resource area. So all the smaller storms will be held in the field to infiltrate into the ground rather than running off into the wetland. The outlet control at the multi-purpose field is slightly different in that the flow comes from the field and flows into dry wells, several dry wells that have an overflow. So when you get to the higher storms, the dry well will fill up and then it'll overflow very much the way this overflow pipe here does, only it's exposed. Just a couple photos from the field construction so you see what the materials look like. These are the flat panel drains being laid out. This is the bottom side of the carpet. If you've seen home carpet before, this is very much what it looks like. You can see the same thing here. This particular turf does not have a pad underneath. The fields at Norton will actually have that shock pad. It's about a half an inch thick, between a half and 3/4 of an inch. And this is what an outlet would look like with the scour protection at the outlet. The outlet control structure, you can see the field in the background here. The outlet control structure is placed generally between this outlet and the field, somewhere in here. And that's how the flow is controlled out of the field. So environmental benefits, environmental concerns, I can't see it because I apologize, it's behind the display. So what are the environmental concerns with infield turf versus natural grass? One of the commission members or someone who spoke at the meeting had said, well, why don't we just use natural grass? Well, you know, there's natural grass there now, and we use natural grass for a lot of fields, but natural grass isn't 100% environmentally friendly, so to speak, because of the things we have to do to it to get it to perform as intended. So On this field, the design is to have crumb rubber, which is made from recycled tires. The crumb rubber has been used as infill since the beginning of modern infield fields back approximately 22 years ago. The first modern infield field in New England was at UMass Lowell, excuse me, I'm dating myself. And now there's been several hundred installations since. So the crumb rubber is made from recycled tires. Originally, they used to chop the tires up with the steel belts in there, and that was problematic because that would contribute to the metals leachate. They have changed the way that they do that. They removed the steel belting before they actually recycle the tires, and they also wash. The crumb rubber to make sure that any of the first flush materials that you would get off of it, that issue is taken very much reduced. And so when we use these synthetic fields, we can see water savings of over 400,000 gallons per year. They don't require pesticides or fertilizer. The fertilizer, as you know, can contribute nitrogen and phosphorus to the wetland resource areas from runoff. You don't have to line these fields like you would a natural grass field to adjust the pH. These fields are essentially porous pavement. So this base stone, allows for quite a bit of groundwater recharge. You don't get that with a natural grass field because the loam is restrictive and doesn't let the water infiltrate as readily. You don't have to mow, you don't have to stripe it. The striping is tufted into the carpet. So the striping is there as long as the carpet's there. You don't have to aerate. You don't have to use machines on it unless you plow the fields, and some of our clients do plow the fields. Managed natural turf is not necessarily environmentally friendly. So now I am going to have Marie speak about how we look at the effects of these materials on the users and on the environment. Marie?
Hi, thank you. My name is Marie Ruderman. I'm a risk assessor and toxicologist from Weston and Sampson. I do human health and environmental risk assessment, and my focus is on public health. So how do I look at these synthetic turf fields? There are two main ways. We will evaluate the synthetic turf by doing analyses on them to see if we can pull out any of the contaminants within them and compare the concentrations of those contaminants to applicable standards. And the other way that I look at it, at synthetic turf, is through risk assessment. So comparable standards can be comparing to background that may be in soil, or comparing to Mass DEP Method 1 standards. There's also EPA standards out there. There's Method 1 GW3 standard for groundwater. That is something that we use to look at the potential for ecological risks. And then risk assessment is when you select individual receptors and you assume that those receptors are exposed to those contaminants that you've pulled out of the crumb rubber or the synthetic turf through various ways, through various exposure routes. So we assume that they ingest the crumb rubber particles, they have dermal contact with them, they may inhale chemicals that potentially could volatilize from the synthetic turf field. And then, of course, we also look at the potential for leaching of the chemicals into groundwater, which, of course, is what we're looking at for ecological health risks. Next slide, please. So there are standards that synthetic turf meets. They meet the ASTM standard for safety for toys, which restricts the the concentrations of metals that can be in these synthetic turf fields and in the crumb rubber. They also meet the European Union Category 3 safety for toys, which also restricts metals. The reason I have both of those up there is because there's different concentrations for both of those. So synthetic turf fields typically will meet both of those standards. If you want to have any of your synthetic turf in California, it has to meet California Prop 65. So most of the synthetic turf that is manufactured today meets Prop 65. If you want to have your synthetic turf out in Europe, it has to meet REACH standards of safety as well. And so California Prop 65 restricts carcinogens and other toxic compounds, and REACH, similar to California Prop 65, restricts carcinogens and other toxic compounds. Next. Okay, so this is for human health risk assessment. The risk assessment, the basic calculation that I do to determine whether or not there's a potential health risk with exposure to chemicals is a health risk is equivalent to the exposure times the toxicity, and also concentration has a is in there too. So it's really concentration times exposure times toxicity. So I typically will use a maximum or a 95th percentile concentration on the mean, which is, it's higher than the mean concentration. And I use a series of conservative exposure assumptions, such as using sensitive receptors, a 1-year-old child, a 1 to 7-year-old child, and a 1 to 30-year-old child adult. So those are 3 different exposures that I would do on the same data, essentially, to see if like a 1-year-old child may have a subchronic type of health risk from exposure to the chrome rubber. I use elevated exposure times, so 3 days per week, 30 weeks per year, and that can be over a period of 30 years. Enhanced ingestion rates, enhanced dermal contact rates. I assume the crumb rubber would stick to the face, forearms, hands, lower legs, and feet. And all of these assume that crumb rubber can be ingested like soil or adhere to the skin like soil, when in reality, crumb rubber, is much less. It's much less likely to adhere to the skin like soil. And these, and also built in the risk assessment are very conservative toxicity values, which are typically based on a no observed effect level or a low observed effect level, with many uncertainty factors kind of applied to those. And when I've done risk assessments on synthetic turf and the analyses that have been done on the crumb rubber, I've found over and over again that there's no significant risk associated with the chemicals that you can pull out of crumb rubber during the various analyses that are done. And those analyses are done with, extreme acids or extreme bases to try to pull as much of the potential contaminants out of crumb rubber and the synthetic turf. And they don't really represent natural conditions. And I say, don't forget bioavailability, because under natural conditions, the contaminants that are within the crumb rubber and within the synthetic turf are bound within the matrix of the plastic, and they're bound within the matrix of the crumb rubber. And very little of those contaminants leach out under natural conditions. Next slide, please. And this actually is backed up by research done by EPA. The Federal Research Action Plan is a multi-step study that's being performed by the EPA on crumb rubber infill, particularly. And so far, everybody's been complaining because it's been taking a long time to get through all of these studies that they're doing. But they've come out with part 1, volumes 1 and 2, which addresses potential exposure and what is actually in the crumb rubber and how people come into contact with the material. And the findings of the volumes 1 and 2 support the premise that while chemicals are present, human exposure appears to be limited based on what is released into the air, which is actually extremely low concentrations are, released into the air. They're really finding not anything above background, or that can be exposed through simulated biological fluids. So essentially what they're saying is that the chemicals that are bound within the matrix of the crumb rubber are not bioavailable. So next slide, please. So this is, I put this together from, what I see on the internet, but also what I've seen in other public meetings, various concerns that people have about crumb rubber and synthetic turf. So the internet claim is that there's high levels of heavy metals, lead, arsenic, cadmium, chromium, mercury, etc. But the science shows, and also the analytical data that that's out there for synthetic turf and crumb rubber indicates that they do meet the ASTM and EN standards for safety and EU standards for safety in toys. And so the metals concentrations are below a level that would be considered hazardous. And in fact, when I've done analyses on synthetic turf, specifically the crumb rubber, they're typically the concentrations of metals, including lead, which I know is a big concern, is at background. So again, the internet claim that crumb rubber contains lead and there's no safe level of lead. The literature indicates that lead is at background concentrations, and this is actually confirmed in EPA's study, the FRAP that I mentioned in the last slide. And then the other internet claim, and probably the most common thing that I hear, is that the crumb rubber causes cancer, specifically non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and leukemia. There's, if you go onto the internet, Coach Griffin has a list of people who have gotten cancer, and some of them are goalies, soccer goalies, and she was kind of a whistleblower at, asking the question, and there were lots of news articles, probably 2015, 2016, about her having the feeling that she thought that that crumb rubber was causing non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and leukemia in soccer goalies. And that's because she was at the hospital visiting a child who had lymphoma, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and that child was a goalie. And coincidentally, there was another child there who was also a goalie. And she started creating a list of people who had cancer. So there was an investigation done by the state of Washington, the Department of Public Health, and they did an epidemiology study. They looked at cancer rates in children that weren't soccer players and children that were soccer players, and they actually found that the incidence of cancer was less among soccer players than expected, and that there was no correlation between exposure to synthetic turf to cancer. And they actually found that there was less of an incidence of cancer in soccer players, and that's not necessarily because they're playing on synthetic turf. That's more likely because they're healthier than the general population because they're out there playing. Next slide, please. Okay, so the internet claim, the presence of a chemical is equal to a health effect. That we know is not true. Health effects are dependent upon whether or not the chemical is bioavailable, how much of that chemical you're exposed to, the concentration, and the route of exposure. So you're more likely to have a health effect generally if you ingest or inhale a contaminant than if you're exposed dermally, because the skin has such a great barrier for exposure. So another internet claim, EPA has no scientific basis for downplaying toxic exposure risks. If you go onto the internet, there's a website that goes through 97 peer-reviewed scientific studies, and a huge number of them show no significant risk. You'll see the words no significant risk over and over. And, you know, there's a bunch of different studies there, so they study different things. But, you know, I definitely encourage you to look through those studies and you know, see, there's a lot of information out there. So the internet claim is EPA and scientists are using flawed science, and risk assessments can't be trusted. So risk assessment is the tool that I use and that many state and federal agencies use to determine whether or not there is a risk to human health associated with exposure to a chemical. And we use overly protective assumptions to try to make that determination. And it's been in practice since EPA was started. And, you know, Mass DEP uses it. Every state agency in the US uses risk assessment, and the EU uses it. It's all over the place. So, you know, I put my trust in risk assessments because they are very overly protective. Next slide, please. And I just wanted to reiterate, because this is the number one thing that people bring up to me, this cancer concern. So I'll just read the findings of the Washington Department of Public Health's findings here. This investigation found less cancer among soccer players, select and premier players, and goalkeepers on the coaches list than expected based on the rates of cancer among Washington residents of the same ages. In addition, the currently available research on the public health effects of artificial turf does not suggest that artificial turf presents a significant public health risk. The Washington State Department of Health recommends that people who enjoy soccer continue to play irrespective of the types of field surface. Next slide, please. Okay, so in addition to the health effects or the potential health effects for humans, I also look at the potential environmental effects as well. And the main potential health effect that I'm kind of looking at is leaching of any chemicals into groundwater, which can then migrate into surface water and have an effect on aquatic receptors. So these are some of the peer-reviewed studies that are on EPA's website. You know, if you read the Department of Environmental Conservation for New York, they found in a study that crumb rubber may be used as an infill without significant impact on groundwater quality. A risk assessment for aquatic life protection found that for the 3 types of crumb rubber that they evaluated, the aquatic toxicity was found to be unlikely. And then Hofstra University looked at leaching of metals from crumb rubber for 7 years, and they found that over 7 years, there is no evidence that the use of rubber infill poses a risk in terms of leaching of zinc. And the reason that they're talking about zinc is because they found that zinc was the only metal that did leach in real detectable concentrations above background from rubber. Next slide, please. So I've also done some research myself, and this is actually research from a colleague of mine from Haley and Aldridge. They looked at a synthetic turf field that was installed with crumb rubber in Concord at the Fenn School, Concord, Massachusetts, and they took quarterly sampling of groundwater from, I think it was 5 monitoring wells in the area of the synthetic turf, up gradient, down gradient. You know, they took some up gradient data so that they could determine if the concentrations of metals were above background. And that's also one thing you have to understand, is that there are actually metals in background groundwater. If you were to take samples of groundwater that are nowhere near synthetic turf, you will find background concentrations of metals. So these graphs present the metals that were detected in the down gradient groundwater from the synthetic turf field at the Fenn School. So let's see. The red line is the GW3 standard. I had mentioned before that the Method 1 Massachusetts DEP GW3 standard is protective of potential migration of leachate to a down gradient surface water body. So it's a groundwater standard that's protective of down gradient surface water. And as you can see, the concentrations of lead were well below the GW3 standard. Actually, the concentrations of all 4 of these that were graphed were well below the GW3 standard. We graphed lead, zinc, cadmium, and copper because those were the concentrations that, you know, we saw that were, you know, well, everybody's worried about lead, so we graphed lead. And then cadmium, one of the local residents had an issue, was very worried about cadmium, so we graphed cadmium as well. Zinc, because it was above what we determined to be background, and copper also was determined to be above background, but only zinc and copper were slightly above the background concentrations. And in fact, copper was, it only had this one hit here that was above background throughout the 5 years of exposure. So, or 5 years of analysis. So, all of the detected concentrations of all 4 of the metals that we graphed were less than well below the GW3 standard. And really only zinc was the only metal that we saw that was above background concentrations. So from this data, we concluded that there was no significant risk to down gradient receptors, down gradient aquatic receptors. Are there any questions?
Well, let's, since it's fresh on our minds, the last 4 graphs you showed, those were only 4 chemicals. I'm not a chemist. One question would be, are those the only 4 chemicals we're concerned about regarding PFAS? And the other is, one of those was, one or two of those were above, were they not? Some of the critical line that you had.
Nope, so there's, that's not,
Let me just clarify for Dan. These are strictly metal ions, and particularly when it comes to cadmium, what salt of cadmium are we talking about? There are some that are fiercely toxic, and some that are relatively benign. So, but this doesn't address in any way the massive soup of polycyclic and polyhalogenated compounds that also come out of this material, which is so complex that you can't really analyze. I mean, it's just this massive molecular soup. So, but go ahead, try to address Dan's.
No, I think that answers enough of the question right there. There's no need to. I mean,
SVOCs were also analyzed and not detected. So SVOCs were analyzed for a full year of quarterly monitoring, so 4 different times, and were never detected. So they dropped that as a, as what they were analyzing for moving forward, because they were never detected in the first year.
But
and then other metals were also analyzed, but these were the only 4 that were graphed, because the other metals were either at non-detectable levels or never came close to being above background. And in fact, the lead and the cadmium and really the chromium were at background levels as well. We just graphed them because people had concerns about lead and cadmium and copper. Is the other one, sorry.
But these, with regard to both the health risk and the environmental risk, these metals really don't compare to the concerns about these polycyclic compounds and polyhalogenated compounds.
Those are included in the SVOCs, though.
But here's my concern. We're talking about cancer risk, but you're citing methods that can't really assess that. I mean, how long does it take to get cancer from smoking, in your estimation?
Probably in the neighborhood of 20 years or something like that.
At a minimum. And it really, and the difficulty with smoking is that if you smoke for 15 years, your cancers will begin to show up at 20 years in small numbers, but then as time goes on, more and more cancer shows up. So here you present to us that the experience with these turf materials is about 20 years old, and we won't know if there's truly a risk. Here we're exposing young people at potentially their greatest vulnerability, and depending on their enthusiasm for these sports, they may have significant extended times of exposure. And then is our toxic concern going to show up, begin to show up at 20 years and become more? I mean, I'm particularly concerned about the issue of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And I just don't think your duration of study could possibly show a concerning signal. And if we're already having people raising anecdotal concerns, that's really unnerving to me. But, potentially we're asking a question that I don't think your methods, and I know your methods are derived from a certain, tradition isn't the right word, but a certain background of data accumulation that works well in some areas, but is not necessarily extendable to this. So that's my concern. And with regard to environmental concerns, it's the same problem. We don't necessarily have the time frame to be able to truly assess the risk of these materials concerning what's actually in them. But it's just my concern, and obviously, the decision is being made here based on financial, certain list of financial reasons.
Mr. Chairman, that's a misstatement by you. I'm sorry, Joe Pyatt, superintendent of schools. That's a true misstatement that you're making. I'm going to tell you, if I may, my concern here is it seems as though the commission has already made a decision on what it's going to do. Clearly, comments about natural grass, comments about the internet and cancer.
I can address that.
Let me finish, Mr. Pearson. You had your time, so let me have my time, if you don't mind. You've made a number of statements that are not calculated in any way to science over and over again. That said, you're in a position of authority. I have to grant you that. The issue of this project started with 5 years ago, looking at improving fields that are falling apart, and to be quite honest, dangerous for students to be participating in. We took 2 years of a number of volunteers working together to look at the best approach. We went to town meeting, requested $20,000 for the purposes of studying the next best steps on what to do around the current situation of the fields as a high school use and a community use. From there, we hired a third party to come in, it was Gale, for the purposes of looking at what should go where. From there, I myself have visited over 30 sites, spoken to over 25 superintendents, my athletic director, my high school principal, the same thing, on situations of projects that are over 20 years of age and projects that have been done just in the last pre-COVID, just in the last 18 to 24 months. At no point at that stage did we talk the specifics of X, Y, or Z of the fields. We then, with Gale, put together the project from the purposes of how do we put together a project that is in the best interest. And those that are on the call know how I work. I go for the A game. I don't go for the D. I don't go for the cheap. Never has been the way I've run the school system or been a superintendent. From there, we had 11 different iterations of the project. 11. Ranging in a wide variety of cost. As you know, or you may recall, there was a lot of discussion about having this project, the town hall and the senior center being one question. That's eventually how it was voted as a town meeting vote and a citizens vote. From there, right before that stage, we were discussing what do we need to move forward? What is the basis of this one-time attempt to do these fields? That's the conclusion we came to. So it was the high school football field, the opportunity behind the Yale School where the fields are, it's basically prior to my coming here many years ago, was used as a place to just drop timber and wood and stuff. That's why it's all elevated and can't be used. And from there, we took a move to the town to vote. The number $6.3 million, which was taken at the time for this project, 6.37, if I remember correctly. At that time, as we were working to address the issues of going for the vote and the project, we said we needed a multi-purpose field and the high school field done. The big changeover in that project was actually the tennis courts, which have been built at the middle school on top of a leaching field. Hence the reason why it's breaking apart. We didn't want to spend $350,000 on putting new tennis courts at the middle field on top of a leaching field, which probably should have never happened to begin with. That's back in the 1997. So the cost of this project came in not because of pellets or because of what the commission may want. It came in as a true understanding of speaking to people that are in the industry, reviewing situations of other towns that have had question marks take place, looking at the science and not just Googling, and then long-term really looking at the aspects of what these fields are going to be like. I don't question that I may be sitting with you tonight here and have cancer. Hopefully I don't. But the fact is, we hired a third party to come in who is looking at the data, is looking at areas where information has been collected over years, has looked at the information from the perspective of actual research and study. I have opinions, you have opinions, but I don't think it's appropriate to say that this project has come forward based on financials. It hasn't. It's come forward based upon looking at the best project for Norton. If the commission wants us to completely get away from using crumb rubber, and wants us to use X instead, then I would ask the commission that if that's what its intent is, then to lay that on science on why we should make that change. Because there are problems, there are going to potentially be problems with something else as well. And so we went with the science of how this should be moving forward in terms of the questions that were asked at the two previous meetings. That's one. Two, I think the commission always has its hands full with making difficult decisions like I do, but I think we should be grounded on what the data is showing us. And what the data is showing us is pretty clear.
Well, let me.
Mr. Chairman, if I may just step in for a second right here.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things, you know, since I don't have any voting power, I feel like I should step in and state some stuff. You know, one of the things that the commission is tasked with doing is ensuring that no public interests in accordance with the Wetlands Protection Act are impacted by this project. And, you know, one of the things I was hoping to get tonight, this evening, was kind of a clear, concise presentation, which would be presented to the commission for those public interests, what they are, and how basically that this project and a whole, the stormwater component and the environmental component, are not going to impact the portions of the Wetland Protection Act. So I don't know if Bree, you want to potentially step in and discuss some of those stuff. Maybe we can walk through that.
But I'd like to be remembered because I have some things to say in response to some comments. So.
All right. Well, Mr. Beta and I had a kind of a conversation. I'd like to continue, you know, because you project a degree of confidence that I just don't have. And so you feel comfortable that those who are telling you that the science is clear, you feel comfortable the science is clear. Is that correct?
I think he said that, didn't he?
Yes.
Okay. Well, you know, I have spent my life in science, also as a physician, but also as a bench scientist, and assessing data has been part of my life, my professional life throughout. And I am not comfortable with this data. And if you feel that you standing for the welfare of the children of this community and of this region, that it's a done deal, fine, but I don't feel that degree of comfort. And I will say for all of you out there that do feel so confident, that's fine, but I don't share that.
May I?
Your degree of confidence is not convincing to me, but we'll leave that aside. And Dan, why don't you make your comments brief, because there are other people that have raised their hands.
I'll try to be as brief as possible. I'm answering some things that were said. Twice tonight we've talked about how it's been mentioned that I said, why can't we play on a natural field on grass? But I also said at the last meeting And I had hoped that there'd be other alternative materials. I don't know. That's the onus is on you, not on us. There were no alternative materials besides this crumb rubber. There was no coconut, whatever else it is. I don't know. You say you've done all these studies, Mr. Beta. What other materials are there? And if you're not concerned about the money, then get something that's the healthiest. That's what I say. Also, somebody commented that we shouldn't be making decisions based on health. What do you think we're concerned about the groundwater? What do you think the concern is about the groundwater? Of course, we're worried about health. Within the WPA, the Wetlands Protection Act, and I just want to emphasize I said this, but the onus is on the applicant to show us that this will be safe. And I think Mr. Salas, who has put so many comments on, he should be allowed to talk.
Dan,
he seems to have things to say. Let him speak.
All right, Dan, you're getting off topic here. You know, as it was previously stated, there are people who have strong opinions. And I think we have to allow a few other people to speak. We're not going to resolve this by speaking strongly. So I see there's a hand up by the screen labeled Victor Rodriguez. Do you want to go ahead and ask your question or make your comment?
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. The concerns that I have, we're coming off of, talking about rail trails and talking about health issues and specifically putting things toward public health. And that should have been something for the Board of Health, et cetera, et cetera. We're seeing these type of fields and facilities done all throughout the country, all throughout the state for many, many, many years. And when you're comparing and you're talking about aspects of health, the survey that was done on children's health, based off a children's type of cancer, and saw that there was no correlation between that. By saying, hey, what are we not going to know 20, 25, 30 years from now? We're seeing that already currently in fields that are currently in existence with this type of material, with similar types of material, with actually material that is less than this type of material that is here. It's very, very unfortunate when part of the committeeman, Dan, first of all, please do us a favor and speak professionally. Do not slander, mispronounce a gentleman's name who's worked very, very hard for our schools. Like, we get to be very, very
I'm sorry, Mr. Rodriguez, I did not know how to pronounce his name.
But you got to do it in the tone of your voice and everything that's going. Believe you me, my wife tells me every day. It's not.
All right, we're getting off topic.
Yeah, Mr. Rodriguez cut off Julian. He cut off Julian. Why did I not?
Just tell us how to pronounce his name.
Yes,
Dr. Baeta. Dr. Baeta. So very, very
good.
So
that carries the day.
I will never get it wrong again.
So as you're going through and you're taking a look at things, you're comparing lung cancer to what you're seeing here. You're talking about effects of something that happens in adults to what you're talking about here. We've shown you the proof. We've shown you the evidence. We have the science and everything behind it. It's unfortunately, you guys, it's just as Dr. Baeta said, you guys are the ones that are in the power of this. Just because it's out there, and if you were to poll, which you have, and gone through and made a vote, unfortunately, the ones who are in the minority, which are you guys who do not feel that we are presenting you with the proper information and the science, just because you don't believe it, makes it unfortunate for the rest of the kids and the town of Norton, just because on how you feel, rather than what a majority does. And that's the problem. 51% isn't good enough anymore.
It's true. It's 51% of the vote in Norton. There's still 49% who count, though. But that's not our job right now. And I can quote to you from the EPA. Current peer-reviewed scientific studies have shown that exposure to certain levels of PFAS may lead to reproductive effects such as decreased fertility or increased high blood pressure in pregnant women, developmental effects or delays in children, including low birth weight, accelerated puberty, bone variations, or behavioral changes, increased risk of some cancers, including prostate, kidney, and testicular cancers, reduced ability of the body's immune system to fight infections, including reduced vaccine response. I suppose I could go on. That's the EPA's website. You can look at it. That's not
And
just
for every
internet.
survey you have, Dan, for every survey you have, I have one that can show the opposite.
Okay.
Well, that's
all right.
50%. That's an F, my book.
Dan, you got to stop for the moment. And I just need to clarify for everyone that first, I've been told that through all these chats that I'm supposed to be biased. This process is a public information gathering process where people are allowed to voice their concerns. And I have not prejudged this, but I do have concerns, and I'm allowed to have concerns, just as each one of you are allowed to have concerns. So we're going to allow other people to speak, and I believe Mr. Ingram is next, and then Carrie, and then Mr. Savas. So Mr. Ingram, would you go ahead and ask your question?
Yes, thank you. So Jim Ingram, live on Dean Street here. I do have questions if we're kind of talking about things that you can see on the internet. With some of the more natural infills, has anybody thought about what these potentially could do for people that have nut allergies, right? So you can, whether it's coconut or whether it's walnut shells, has anybody thought about that potential immediate negative effect to the kids?
Well, as a physician, I can address that, but perhaps we should just leave that aside.
I just want to make that as a point if we're going to talk about potential effects long term.
It's a good point. Point well taken. I don't know. I don't know what else besides crumb rubber. I'm not the applicant.
No, you aren't the applicant, but I mean, you're
All right,
causing enough issues as it is.
Okay, it's a good point. So Carrie, I think you're up next.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to get back to the points that Dan and John were making. So Dan's right. The burden is certainly on the applicant to show that this project isn't going to impact the values that we're charged with protecting. And I don't think anybody would argue that these chemicals that we're talking about that are bound within these products are dangerous, in studies, and they are associated with health concerns. But from what I'm seeing, they are showing that the studies that they've looked at are not showing any increase in these background levels of these chemicals. So I think while it's not like a line drawn to the values like John was asking, I do think that it is showing that these products are safe and they're not elevating our exposure in the environment. But to get back to John's question, I wonder, I don't know if we had more or to draw that line specifically from the studies that you're looking at and the values, in the Wetlands Protection Act that we're trying to uphold.
All right, there's another individual with a hand up. Last name Savas. Go ahead with your question.
Hi, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for letting me speak. My name is Dinesh Savas. I am the chairman of the Norton School Committee. I'll make my comments brief because I think a lot of people probably do want to speak. And also, I'm not 100% convinced that some of you have not already made up your minds here. So, the Ms. Ruderman had stated, and I saw the same data myself when I was looking at this, 97 peer-reviewed studies, including the EPA, have said no discernible link to cancer with this. When the soccer coach, Amy Griffin, originally came up with this theory, it was immediately investigated by, as Ms. Ruderman said, Washington Department of Health and the Washington University Public Health School. They looked at it. First thing they did was they said, okay, what are the numbers of people who have cancer generally, and does this jive with that? As Ms. Ruderman said, it was lower. I think one of the second things they said, and I don't know if she addressed this, and she can correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Chairman, you said you were particularly concerned about non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. One of the issues with that study was all of the people in it had different types of cancers. It wasn't a singular type of cancer. That was one of the reasons they were able to say, this is not a cluster group. It's not a bunch of people getting cancer from the same thing. Ms. Ruderman, am I mistaken in that?
No, you're correct.
So you have a bunch of people getting cancer at a lower rate than the general public, and they're all getting different types of cancers. I don't know how at this point we can say we can link this to cancer anymore. I think that we've effectively debunked that. So with respect to us, as the applicants coming forward and saying we have to kind of show it, I think we've shown it at this point. I don't know what else we can do. And I think it's a fair question on our part to say, what more do we have to do to show it?
So I'm going to speak as a professional that's dealt with the Wetlands Protection Act for 20 years. I'm also going to speak as a commissioner of a conservation commission in metropolitan Boston for 7 years. I'm no longer a commissioner there. The commission is tasked with protecting the interests of the Wetland Protection Act, and that does include water supply. And as serious as a topic as it is, public health is not within the purview of the commission as it relates to users. It is a very serious topic, and it's something that should be taken very seriously. It is incumbent on the applicant, which is us, which is the town, to prove within a preponderance of the evidence, which is more likely than less likely, so over 50%, that the project will not adversely affect the interests of the Wetland Protection Act. And so the purview of the commission is really to decide whether or not we provided enough support for the interests to protect the interests of the Wetland Protection Act. And so with the stormwater standards being met, we spoke to that, the peer reviewer spoke to that, we spoke to that. I anticipate the peer reviewer coming back saying that we've addressed his concerns, which speaks to meeting the interest of the stormwater protection, the stormwater portion of the Wetlands Protection Act. And as far as the harmful nature of the materials that we're using, it seems to me that with the evidence that we've presented, it seems pretty clear that with the studies we've presented and the studies that have been done, that we are showing that it's not likely going to be adversely impacting the aquatic receptors and therefore not impacting the drinking water supply. And so Marie Ruderman is a toxicologist and a risk assessor. This is what she does for a career. And she does this day in and day out. And she looks at these numbers all the time. And if we can't rely on what she's telling us about the safety of this material, and by the way, Marie deals extensively with turf fields and crumb rubber and for many years. And this is what she lives. This is what she does. That's why we retained her services to speak to this. I don't know how much more proof that we can provide to you within a preponderance of the evidence that this material is safe.
I personally think we need to go back to the original question, which was not whether this was safe. In fact, I raised the question. And the question was, is the town making an informed decision? Right, so we're charged with looking at the groundwater quality, are we in a drinking water supply? No. Could there be increased rates in the of zinc above background? Yes. Okay. Those were all addressed. My point to this whole thing from the very beginning was, is the town making an informed decision? That's all I asked for. And then you come back with this, mountain of evidence in defense. All you had to do was say, the school committee's on board with this, and Superintendent Baeta is on board with this. We're good. we made the decision that we can live with the potential risk. That's all I was looking for.
All right, well,
Right? We said, I don't have school-age kids, so I have no vested interest in this either way.
all right, well,
We
this,
said that from the very beginning, so
all right.
for the other side to get so
And
defensive,
we're gonna say,
it's crazy.
all right, Lisa, this is the public hearing process. We are bringing forth the information, and apparently, at least some people don't like questions being asked, and I don't mind that. But I think Mr. Seaver had his hand up, and we can go ahead with your question.
Hi guys, thanks for the opportunity. Just a quick question, just some food for thought maybe. I know this is clearly not the first turf field in town. I know Wheaton College has a turf field. Do you guys have any background or any information regarding what they used for their infill, whether it was crumb rug? Obviously they must have went to the board to you guys. I don't know whether it was you as a board at the time, but maybe if you had some insight into what they've used. Clearly, I mean, their proximity to wetlands is just as close to ours as ours will be someday, supposedly. But just some insight, just some question. I'll just get off and listen for a response.
Before the commission, one. And two, if one more person cites the fact that everybody else has it, why can't we? I think it's a really lame question. Because
I'm
who
gonna
knows
actually.
what the law, like
Right.
Jason said.
I don't need the defensiveness. I just asked a question for food for thought. All right. I don't know where you're coming
Yes.
at me like that. It was a
And-
question. I
and
have
we've
nothing
been
to do
asked
with
that
anything.
question over and over. What does Taunton use? What is Wheaton use? To me, it's completely irrelevant. because
They're in our
they
town. How is it
selected
irrelevant? They're
All
in
right,
our
Mr.
town.
They could have
Mr. Seaver.
selected
All right, I'm
that
done. Thank you.
product years ago.
If you don't mind,
before
just, if you
became
don't
more
mind, I
complete.
just want to respond to Mr. Seaver. I did look at that file, and the fields were built in the 1990s. Obviously, since then, there's been a lot of different research that's been done on fields. Obviously, if you look back at things, historically, new research comes out, and that's kind of what the commission's tasked with is what's available for research. So there's new research on this turf component. I'm in agreement with Bree, by the way, with a couple of the items for the public interest that seem to be addressed, but I think there's some more things that can be ironed out and maybe have, some surety for the commission next time that we discuss this project at the next meeting to just kind of roll over with kind of that just, obviously the protection of public and private water supply, protection of groundwater supply, flood control, all the interests, and just have those laid out for the commission, just so that way they understand the commission is apprised of the public interests and how you're meeting all those standards. And then hopefully the stormwater stuff that comes through can provide a little bit more closure to this. That's all I have to say.
All right, and so, John, I'd like to go to the next person with a question, Julie Oakley, if you could just ask your question or make your comment.
Yeah, hi, Julie Oakley again, 6 Beverly Lane. I just wanted to say, as a voting member and someone who will have hopefully 2 boys who participate on these fields and participate in sports at the high school and town recreational sports as well, that when I voted for this project, I felt like it was very clearly communicated by the school committee that it was turf fields. I don't think that was, a part of the question at the time. And I feel like they had been very forthcoming in the material. And I feel like if the public voted for that project, it was because they agreed with that material as part of the project. And secondly, I do appreciate both Bree and John explaining the applicability of the Conservation Commission and what is in the Wetland Protection Act, because I do feel that a lot of us parents are now kind of getting engaged in this process because we don't feel that we have a say in what our children are going to participate and what type of field they're going to play on. So I think that we really need to hone back on what exactly is the applicability of that act on this project. Thank you.
All right, and Mr. Savas?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Very quickly, I think the comment was made that they just want assurances that the school committee and Dr. Baeta were in favor of this and understood the risks and were willing to take those risks. I don't want to speak for Dr. Baeta, but I can certainly speak for the entirety of the school committee. We had multiple meetings over multiple years on this, and we are absolutely 100% okay with it. We're okay with the risks. We find them to be more than acceptable, and we are willing to move forward.
All right, and Dr. Baeta?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Through you to our Conservation Director, Mr. Thomas. In the comment you just made, you outlined 2 or 3 things to come back with. Will those be put in writing to Bree so that those can be addressed at the nearest possible?
I can discuss those with John, but I know what he's referring to. I know exactly what part of the act he's referring to, and I can speak to those.
Sorry, I accidentally muted you, Joe.
That's okay.
I'm sorry.
That's probably the best thing that's happened all night.
No. I tried to unmute to respond to you. Sorry.
And second, through you, Mr. Chairman, in terms of the a number of comments that have been made around materials, is there a suggestion that examples of other materials should be provided to the Conservation Commission?
I don't have that answer, but I'm going to say that this is a public hearing. It's a public information gathering process, and we did that. And I know there have been expressions that people feel that they can read our minds, but this is part of that process of coming to a conclusion. Now there was one last, so Peter, you gotta make it brief.
Yes, I'm the voice of no offer some athletic fields. It's time we move this project forward and vote for the field.
We're still in the public hearing process, Peter. So I think unless there are further questions, I think there's information that needs to be brought forward in the future, and we can consider a continuation of this hearing unless there is a burning desire for someone else to comment.
Let just clarify one point. When it is said that turf was implied or communicated in the original communication from the school board, I assume then that what you mean by that is artificial turf.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yep. All right. So Bree is a continuation until February 14th. Your preferred time frame?
Yes.
Why are you doing news from television in 1920?
All right. So if everybody is okay with it, we can consider a motion to continue this hearing until February 14th.
Mr. Chairman, I'll also move to continue the, I'm sorry, I don't have the file number in front of me.
I believe it is 250-1091.
109.
So we have a motion
250-1091 to continue it.
Second. All right, motion made by Dan and seconded by? I think Carrie beat you a little bit, Ron, so seconded by Carrie. So roll call vote, starting with Dan and Ron.
Aye.
Aye.
And Carrie and Lisa, you must be there somewhere.
Aye.
Lisa might have slipped off the edge there. And I'll throw in an aye. So a lot of fun tonight, guys. Thank you all for participating. And we'll see you again on the 14th.
Thank you for your time.
All right.
I'm not sure I understood that last comment about a blanket and You don't have a filing cabinet in your blanket fort?
Oh, Dan, I think we're done with that. We just continued on hearing. You're talking about the comments, whatever.
I don't know what is meant by that, but so our next item is continuation of multiple public hearings for 0 Eddy Street. It looks like we haven't had any further information. Is that correct, John? Did we lose John as well?
No, I'm here. Actually, Tim McGuire's here. I just have to find him. There's a lot of people on the call tonight.
I noticed.
Tim, you have co-hosting abilities?
Great, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Good evening, everyone. For the record, Tim McGuire, wetland scientist with Goddard Consulting, here on behalf of Sam Wydeck, the owner and applicant of the property. So where we left off last week with the project, and we did submit this information that I will be showing you to John and Megan recently. This has been submitted to the commission. So we left off discussing the pond versus the river, and we're still hoping to confirm the delineation of the resource areas on site tonight's meeting so that we can proceed with the review of the comments we have from the peer reviewer on stormwater, which will, as we've discussed, be largely influenced by whether or not the area is determined to be a pond versus a river. So this is an orthophoto image from 2010 that we previously discussed at the last hearing. And a member of the commission, I believe it was Lisa, we had asked if we were to compromise and show the river in the center of the pond, or what's mapped as the pond, where would it be? And it was traced, showing right about here, and then ending at this ponded area here and not resuming until the outlet control structure to the east here. So we took that information and ran with it, and using ortho imagery, mostly this 2010 image where it's very clear, along with survey data, we sent the surveyors out and they took data from both banks of the pond and formulated a midpoint and put it on this plan set here that we submitted to the commission, showing the estimated center of the perennial stream and then the 100-foot and 200-foot riverfront. Now this overlaid on that past image, the survey data pretty much lined up exactly with the ortho imagery of the pond. So this is the location that we would like to offer to propose as where riverfront should be drawn off of the stream, again drawn from survey data, as well as pretty spot on following that the channel that you can see in the 2010 image. The project still, so we have the site plans overlaid. We only submitted this one plan sheet, as I indicated. Before we go ahead and redesign and do all the revisions to the project, we're hoping to confirm this first. We do indicate on the plan sheet, however, that the project is still compliant with the performance standard of 10.58, the riverfront area. Because it's such a large parcel, we don't even come close to the 10% for riverfront. So we are under that, and with some impacts to the inner riparian zone occurring within existing degraded surfaces associated with the existing gravel entrance there by the road, by 140. So again, this is what we're discussing. We're hoping to confirm with the commission. You can see we called out the specific ponded area. In fact, we were a little more conservative with that. We went a little further than what the commission had indicated as the ponded area to be safe. And we're hoping to have the commission confirm this at this meeting, and we will continue with the stormwater design, etc. Thank you very much, and I'd be happy to entertain any questions or concerns.
So I have a question for John.
Sure.
Well, I mean, to me, in my personal opinion, and that I guess you could say the Rivers Act, and the Wetland Protection Act are pretty specific about defining what is a pond and what is a river. So in my mind, I have never really considered the historical extent of Meadowbrook Pond to be anything other than a pond. But are there any criteria that would help us in the regulations to know when to apply this riverine characteristic to a pond?
Oh, I mean, there's various studies that are out there, and there's various different projects that have come before this one, not here in town, but in other towns. And I know that, for instance, DEP has ruled in favor of certain scenarios of this being a pond, and then in certain scenarios of it having riverfront area associated with it. So similarly to the, turf project, I mean, not to bring it up, but I mean, there's different sides to the story with that as well. If the commission feels that this pond is enacting a pond for pond, I guess, dynamics, then it should be treated as such. But if the commission feels that, this pond is a river or has a river that flows through it, then, I think that's what the majority of the commission members voted on last time this was heard, was for the discussion of extrapolating where the extent of the historic riverfront area and the mean annual high water line would have been based on historic data. And that's what Tim and his team have done to account for the request of the majority of the commission members back at the previous meeting.
All right. But there's no specific calculation that we can do other than deciding the
This is one of those gray areas. There's really no calculation that can be done. Obviously, if there was a simple calculation that could have been done, I think Tim and his team would have taken the liberty to pursue that and try to prove their case that there is no riverfront area. It's not like an isolated land subject to flooding calculation. That would be great, but that's not the case here.
All right, very good.
But I mean, based on what I see here on the plan, I am, I'm in favor of this. I think they're showing all the what was requested previously by the majority of the members. I think the riverfront area is shown accurately based on the Wetlands Protection Act and the Rivers Protection Act requirements. So therefore, I have no opposition to this plan being kind of the boundary and confirmation of what is jurisdictional and what's not.
Okay. Any other comments or questions from commission members?
So one thing that we'll have to request from the applicant is once they start doing their revisions and their stormwater redesign, is that we're going to have our peer review consultant fees adjusted or have another fund set up for that, because I believe he has run out of his potential funds for this project.
Absolutely, that shouldn't be an issue. Would you just send us a revised proposal from him?
Yeah, I'll probably have the peer review consultant give us a kind of a rough idea to start, and then maybe flesh out the details later with a proposal.
Okay.
We're gonna work on faith on this one, okay?
Okay.
All right. Anybody have any further questions?
Now, Mr. Chair, if I may, would it take a roll call vote in order for the commission to officially accept this as the course of action moving forward for resource area confirmation for this, or is just kind of an informal, everyone's okay with it, good enough?
Well, yeah, I don't see that a roll call vote is required. I mean, this is, to my eye, this is fine, but I was not concerned about this as an issue to begin with. So maybe other people should make a comment if they feel it's appropriate.
So I would suggest to the commission not to take a roll call vote, but for instance, the meeting minutes will basically be final with this design as proposed, or jurisdictional boundaries and those would hold true for your design component as you move forward with the project.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
So are we at this point of continuing this public hearing? Any further comments, questions? Sounds like we are. I'd say I'd look for a motion to continue this. What would be your preferred time frame? The next meeting or meeting after?
I don't think we realistically would be able to get all of the stormwater comments revised by, I think, what did you say the next meeting was, February 14th?
Correct.
Do you have one at the end of February or early March?
The 28th.
Sure, I'd be happy to request the continuance to the 28th, and we can follow up as that approaches.
Okay, I could entertain such a motion.
I'll make a motion to continue the hearing to the February 28th meeting.
All right, we have a motion made by Ron, and I think Carrie, you slipped in there as a second. All right, roll call vote for that motion, starting with Dan and Ron.
Aye.
And Carrie?
Aye.
And I'll throw in an aye. And Tama, next time you'll be throwing in your aye. All right, so we're going to thank you, Tim, wherever you went. Our next item is...
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Chairman, I just want to make a note that it appears Mr. Pisa is on the call. I wasn't aware that he was going to attend. I don't know if he wanted to say anything this evening.
Okay.
Mr. Pisa, do you want to speak?
He might have stepped away for a moment.
Okay.
But I think our next item has to do with file number 250-1092, 0 South Washington Street, concerning the order of conditions for the billboard.
So if anyone had any additional comments to what member Lisa Carrozza had, please let me know. I can make those adjustments.
I do not have any changes from what was proposed as a draft. Anybody else?
Oh, I'm sorry. What?
We're on the draft of the order of conditions for file 250-10.
No, I'm sorry. No. Sorry.
All right. So we can consider. So you're saying Lisa put in for.
Yeah. So what was highlighted was addressing her comments that she had at the previous meeting. She asked me to put in some stuff, so I did that. So what's highlighted is from her.
All right. And I didn't have any questions or comments about anything else in the draft. So if someone wants to offer a motion for accepting the draft as modified by Lisa's comments. Somebody's, Gary?
So moved. I've got so many screens on here.
Yes, I understand. It's been one of those meetings. So I'm going to say Carrie has put forth a motion to issue the order of conditions for file number 250-1092 as modified and submitted. And it looked like, Ron, you were about to throw in a second.
Second.
And now we can do a roll call vote on that. So we'll start with Carrie and Dan.
Aye.
And Ron?
Aye.
And I'll throw in an aye. So the motion carries. Our next item, I believe, are the minutes Do we have a quorum on that? Yes, I guess we do have a quorum.
We do. We have 4.
We have 4. So again, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just, I interrupted you. I'm Julian. Sorry. You finish. What?
I finished.
Oh, okay. So page 9, very small thing. Conscienti, I think should be cognizant. It would be nice if we were experts in whatever the point was, but
what line are we looking at?
Line from, I think it's about the 6th line from the bottom of page 9. Conoscente, which or if we want the plural, conoscenti. But I think what was meant was cognizant.
Whose comment is it? Sherry Cohen's or?
Well, it's
Breeze.
It's the program it's the computer program.
I understand. I just can't find the voice oops on the text.
Oh, I don't know. I don't have the text in front of me. I just wrote down page 9.
Okay.
All right. So we'll do a search for that one. Megan will do a search for that one.
So
and sometimes it happens because people cut out.
The other is Julian's remark on page 10, about 8 lines down. This is not a fault of Julian, I should add quickly, but again, the program, close up taxpayer. It's one word. Like I said, minor points, but anyway.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't found it yet, but
I don't know, maybe I was looking at the wrong minutes, but I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
Let me go back and while you're
Dan, I see it. I pulled it up, so I'll fix that.
okay, thanks, Megan. No, I'm not crazy. Good.
Well,
just a little hot around the collar.
Yeah, if you're questioning yourself, you're probably not crazy, but because it's the crazy people who really can't question themselves. But that's another academic issue.
That's politics at the federal level.
No, we're talking clinical now. But at any rate, I think with those modifications, we can consider a motion to accept these minutes.
I'll make a motion to accept the meeting minutes for January 10th of this
2022. Yeah, and
2022.
Second.
Seconded by Carrie. So a motion made by Dan and seconded by Carrie to accept the minutes as modified for January 10th. Roll call vote starting with Dan and Carrie.
Aye.
Aye.
And I'll throw in an aye. And Ron, how do you vote?
Aye.
Okay. So let's see, draft minutes. Anything under old or new business to talk about? And it better be good.
We had a violation notice over off of Pine Street, so that's the only bad news.
Okay, but you'll.
I'm dealing with it. I've already talked to the person that's doing the work, and we're working through it.
All right, excellent. So any other items we need to talk about before I have my dinner?
So what would you like me to do with all these public comments that have been in the chat? Because it's part of the record for the meeting.
You should type them up.
Okay.
I think
They should be. I would like them to be typed up.
Okay.
You should be able to just capture them.
Yeah, I captured them all and
Yeah.
I sent them over to my email. So
Yeah, so they would just be included as part of the public comments, because it too is part of the information gathering process of a public hearing.
correct. So we're probably looking at maybe 30, 35 pages of meeting minutes next week or 2 weeks from today.
So Dan,
We're gonna need those 2 weeks in advance then.
Hey, I wish people would send stuff in 2 weeks in advance. It's been tough.
Dan, I expect you to go over them with a fine-tooth comb.
Fine-tooth comb. While we're at it, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to, and members of the commission, members of the public, I'd like to apologize for my heated
Well,
display.
I will respond by saying showing a bit of passion about something is quite okay.
Dan, it may be a good idea to when the meeting next meeting opens up for no. Then when the next meeting opens up next week, to just say that you want to say something before the meeting for the general public. Just publicly apologize a little bit if you want to. It's up to you. You know, just say that you were a little passionate about the situation if you want to, just to try to smooth things over. It's up to you though. Okay.
Possibly it never helps, never hurts. Sorry to concede or something. I thought that's what I was just doing, but anyway,
but
you're right. There will be more people next week.
But at the same time, I think that everybody has to be tolerant of other people's points of view and accepting of people's responses. I don't think it is fair to take offense when people feel strongly about something. And that's, this is part of the process of what we call a democracy. So are we done?
Sorry, can I just clarify, is there a meeting next week or are you talking?
Sorry,
about
I meant 2 weeks. Valentine's Day. Sorry.
Yeah, everybody will have.
Everyone's got to be very, very, cohesive on Valentine's Day.
And wear red, I guess.
Wear red.
And Tama?
Yes.
Just want to, let's say you had a little bit of an introduction by fire tonight. It's not our usual tenor. And one of the things I have liked about the conservation, about the Wetlands Protection Act in general, is it is fairly specific about what is in compliance and what is not. It's uncommon to have difficult meetings like that one.
Well,
just so you don't go run screaming from the room.
That was the most difficult meeting since I've been here. So just so you know. I've had worse meetings. I've been a member. I've been another agent for another town. It wasn't as bad as I thought it would be. To be honest with you, I think everyone, like Dan, all the members are allowed to be passionate, which is fine. But you just got to keep your composure and always reference the Wetlands Protection Act and all the criteria that we're tasked with, administering.
yes. Yep. And it's nice to see people passionate about the town and making Norton the best that they think it should be in whatever way that needs to look like. So,
right.
And for the ride.
So one thing to note just before we leave is Island Brook's going to be coming in. So if you want to refresh yourselves on Island Brook, the materials on the Google Drive. So if you want to take a look to see what they've done, they've revised some stuff based on Mass DEP's requests. John Chesia is actually going through the process to review that and make his comments. So we're hopeful that this will all be kind of ironed out for the 28th meeting. So that way the commission can finally vote on this and hopefully we can come to an agreement for the design component. Right now it's in the hands of DEP and, if it looks like it conforms to the Wetlands Protection Act and all the other stream crossing standards. I can't say anything negative about it.
Okay.
All right. I'm going to thank our audience for participating tonight, and I think we can consider a motion to adjourn. And as usual, it's going to be a hand wave or thumbs up as our vote on adjourning.
Mr. Chairman, I will happily make a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting of the Conservation Commission.
All right. So moved. Good job tonight, and see you next time.
Everyone.
Good night.
Good night.